What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 356. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
How's life?
Life is good. I did not do well at the pre-release, but that's all right.
I did. I went 3-1. Are you proud of me?
Sure. 3-1. I'll be proud of you. I didn't open any masterpieces either, but it's okay. I already knew I wasn't going to open any of those. Because
you're not lucky.
Right. I never opened an expedition. I never opened an expedition either.
I did. I opened 2.
See, there you go.
But we gave away one because one was on a cracker pack on the show. But then I opened up another one that had the same expedition. So how do you like that? All right. So we've got no expeditions, but actually, are we even going to go over it? We should actually mention the masterpieces, shouldn't we? I don't want to talk about them on a card-by-card basis because they come up so infrequently, but we should mention that they exist. We'll talk about that in just a minute.
But the solution I came to with my written review was to just post a picture of a guy holding 2 money bags, and then that was my review of the masterpieces. So
okay, that is a fairly accurate review. All right, so before we get into the Kaladesh Set Review Rare and Mythic Rare Show, I want to mention our sponsor, ChannelFireball.com. Please do check them out for everything you need magic related. That's right. They've got awesome free content. You can go there and find videos, articles, podcasts from some of the best players in the world, all with the goal of helping you improve at magic. We know that that's why you come here to Limited Resources, and I feel very confident in sending you over to Channel Fireball, where you'll get really some fantastic advice. And while you're there, you can pre-order Kaladesh. It will ship on September 30th. That's when it's officially released and able to ship. They're going to send it in the mail all at once on September 30th. So go ahead and get those pre-orders in. You can order sealed product from Kaladesh if you want to get some drafts going together with your friends, or if you just need some singles to fill out, maybe your Canadian Highlander deck, your Commander deck, standard, whatever. You can pick up those singles there. Of course, they also have apparel as well as supplies, all on channelfireball.com. You can also support the show directly. That's right. If you like what you hear on Limited Resources, if you find it useful and helpful for you, you can go to patreon.com/limited resources. And this is a really cool website that lets you give back to the content creators that you appreciate. And, there's a lot of people out there making a lot of cool stuff, a lot of it for free, just like LR. And this is a way for people to give back. As part of it, of course, you get awesome free perks or awesome perks as well. You can get a thank you card sent in the mail and some other really cool stuff, as well as some stretch goals and that kind of stuff too. You can all check it out at patreon.com/limited resources. And I also wanted to mention that if you do like what you hear here, you can subscribe. You can hit that subscribe button on your iTunes or basically anywhere. I try to make it available as many places as possible. You can find it on YouTube, on the LR YouTube channel. You can find it on Stitcher. You can get it through any, podcasting service or whatever. And then you can stay up to date on Limited as we move our way through the format. We have awesome special guests, level up episodes, and of course, we'll keep you up to date on what's going on in the draft format and sealed as well. Okay, so this is the Kaladesh Set Review Rare and Mythic Rare. Luis, why don't you walk us through the grading scale so that people know what those grades mean and why we put them on each card?
Alrighty, we're going to start with A's. A's are your bombs, your game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind, and they're the best cards in the set. Gisela the Broken Blade, Murder, and Niblis of Frost are cards that we would give A's to. The other thing about A's is, there's been some debate over, you take Gisela over Murder, are they both A's? Well, A's just cap out. Like, Gisela might be an A++, we're generally just going to call them A's.
Right.
Because they're the cards you're going to first pick when you see them. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors. So headliners for a set, go-to cards, reasons to be in that color or color combination. Solid removal also, we've been moving more towards B's philosophically, but again, we're going to handle that case by case. Cards like Choking Restraints, Wretched Griff, Thermo Alchemist ended up in the B slot as well. C's are playables. These are the cards that you're going to get a lot of in Limited. Your deck's going to be primarily C's. They're the pawns of Limited. They're cards you're not excited about, but you're not unhappy to have in your deck. Cards like Exultant Cultists, Spectral Reserves, and Backwoods Survivalists. And then D's are the begrudging playables. You prefer not to run them. They're either mediocre and junky or maybe like very situational. And they're cards like Borrowed Hostilities, Crossroads, Consecrator, and Fogwalker. Mm-hmm. F is the virtually unplayable in all scenarios, incredibly narrow cards, and cards with incredibly high mana costs. Emrakul's Influence, which you did play recently, I know.
There's
prying
video
Customers,
evidence.
yes, are examples of Fs. Sideboard is another grade, which are cards that don't make the main deck or very rarely make the main deck, but they can be quite good post-boards. Cards like Turn Aside or Spring Sage Ritual. And then Builder is the last one, which we'll give a grade 2, but we'll mention it. These are cards that you can't just put them in a random limited deck and have them perform, but in the right deck, they're quite good if you, again, build around them. Cards like Shreds of Sanity or Take Inventory. Special note on grades as we go into the rares and mythics, you're going to see more A's and more F's than you would for the commons and uncommons, because you have your best cards in the set. You also have the really weird constructed build-around type nonsense cards that we're often going to have to give an F because just they're not going to pan out.
Okay. So why don't we get into the set review itself here. We're going to start off with black this time. And let's just dive right in, Luis. Our first card is called Demon of Dark Schemes. It's a mythic rare, so you know it's going to be good. It's 3 black, 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 so 6 mana for a 5/5 flying demon. And when Demon of Dark Schemes enters the battlefield, all other creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Wow. Whenever another creature dies, you get an energy counter. And you can pay 2 and a black and 4 energy to put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, tapped.
So the thing about Demon of Dark Schemes that I really need to figure out is how many of these abilities could you remove and have the card still be an A? I think you could probably take off like 2 of them and the card would still be an A.
Definitely 2. Like a 3 black, black, black for a 5/5 flying is already a decent card. It's not quite an A though.
No, but yeah, this card overall just is incredibly good. One of the best cards in the set.
Yeah.
It's a gigantic flyer that's going to kill a bunch of creatures, give you a bunch of energy, and then of course it gives you a way to use that energy to get like a permanent board presence. There's just not a whole lot to talk about Demon. The card is just too good. Like
that's really
the only drawback is it does kill your own creatures. Notice all other creatures, it's not your opponent's creatures, but like that's not a huge drawback. And whenever another creature dies is just a static ability. So yes, you'll get the energy off of whatever it kills, but anything that dies later while Demon's out also gets you energy. So it just sits there accumulating energy. So yeah, if you see Demon of Dark Schemes, you're lucky and you should take it.
I think you should definitely take it. I give it an A.
Yes, Demon of Dark Schemes certainly gets an
A. Eliminate the Competition is next. It's 4 and a black. For a sorcery, it's rare. It says, as an additional cost to cast Eliminate the Competition, sacrifice X creatures. Destroy X target creatures.
An interesting card. It is highly variable. This is not a card I would say is like Windmill Slam Bomb.
No,
but
it's not.
In the right, and it's not quite the level of a build around, even though it has some aspects of that to it. I think it's the kind of card that in the right deck against the right deck is going to be one of your best cards, but against the wrong deck or in the wrong deck is not going to be great. It's a sorcery speed kill spell, so it doesn't kill vehicles.
That's right.
You have to have fodder, so presumably you're fabricating is one of the better ways to start there.
That's right.
But just combine all that stuff and you have a card with a very high potential, but incredibly high setup cost. Like not only do you have to have creatures to sacrifice, they have to have creatures for you to kill, which is just not a given. So I think I'm going to give Eliminate the Competition. I think I'm going to give it like a C+, B-.
I was going to give it a B-. I actually played with this card at the pre-release. I had it in my deck, so I've gotten a chance to kind of feel it out. And like you said, to go one level of detail further is the type of deck that you want to be playing against are like green creatures, like cards that cost 3, 4, 5 mana that you're just picking them off one at a time. The things that you don't want to be playing against are like small, white, like white decks with a lot of Fabricate and stuff like that, where it's like, I'll kill your 2-drop. Yes, and vehicles, of course, too. Also of note, you mentioned the high setup cost, very risky. There are a few counter spells floating around in this format, and you do have to sack your own creatures as a cost to cast this card. So if it does get countered, ouch, you could lose a lot of your board. Now, I did have it though, be an insane blowout a couple of times where I sacrificed, like 3 servos and killed 3 4-drops or whatever. And it was like, okay, this game's just over. So the ceiling is quite high on it, but the floor is very, very low and the setup cost is high. So I'm with you. I think it's in the C+, B- range.
All right. The only addition I want to say to that is that in sealed, I would imagine it goes up a little more because in sealed, you can set up the kind of board states that where this is good a little more often.
All right, so eliminate the competition. C+ is where I'm going to land on it.
All right, I'll go with B- then.
All right, we'll switch. Gonti, I don't know how to say that. Lord of Luxury.
You'll learn by the Pro Tour, though.
Yes, I will. 2 black for a 2/3 legendary Aetherborn rogue with Death Touch. So base stats, pretty decent. 4 mana, 2/3 Death Touch is like, okay, sure. And when the Lord of Luxury, what kind of watch does he have? Enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library. Exile one of them face down, then put the rest on the bottom of that library in a random order. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, you may cast it, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast it.
And, no, I was just hoping there was another and there.
One question for level 0.5 Judge Luis Scott-Vargas. What if our Lord of Luxury here dies?
You can still cast the card. It's the ability that tells you what you can do with the card, and having the Lord of Luxury in play. Notice we're not saying his first name because we don't know what it is.
That's right. I don't know how to say it, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable.
He does not need to be in play anymore. So
correct.
So
I like this card.
This card's very good. I actually had a chance to play with this card twice, oddly enough.
Jeez.
Well, I had it at the spell slinging and at the pre-release.
Okay.
And does his job. Basically, it's a 2-for-1 with card selection. It's slightly worse than 4 mana 2/3 Death Touch Impulse. Like look at your top 4 and put it in your hand, but not much worse. And that card would be very good. So this card is also very good.
And is it actually slightly worse?
Yeah, I would say your deck generally is better because if you have any synergy cards, your deck's going to work better with them.
Okay, fair enough. I was thinking that their deck might make up for that in the sense that they can offer things that your deck may not be able to do otherwise.
Yeah, and I guess you're using one of your rares, so they're probably more other rares on average. Mm-hmm. But either way, Gonti, I'm gonna say Gonti,
all right.
is just a very solid card. This is the kind of card you'll always play if you're in black. I think you would take quite early. I don't have him quite in the A range because he's not like an earth-shattering effect, but compare him to the 4 mana 2/2 draw card, which you're always going to play. Yeah. This is a 2/3. It has Death Touch, and look at their top 4 and pick one is way better than draw card.
Definitely.
So I think Gonti gets a B+ from me.
I do too. I was going to say B+. Now, one other note though is that there is one word that I see here. It says you can cast the card. Does that mean I can't take a land?
Yes, cast does mean non-land.
Okay. Next card is Lost Legacy, and it is 1 black for a sorcery at rare. It says name a non-artifact, non-land card. Search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles his or her library, then draws a card for each card exiled from hand this way.
Lost Legacy is an F.
It's terrible.
You should never put this card in your deck. It is not the way to handle opposing cards.
No.
If they have a card you can't beat, you should try to figure out a way to remove it or a way to mitigate its effect. Not play a card like Lost Legacy, which, like, let's say they have, Verdurous Gear Hulk, the green Gear Hulk. You're like, I can't beat that card, so I put Lost Legacy in. First of all, if you cast it and name it, they might not even ever draw it. And so it's like you spent 3 mana and did literal nothing. Yeah. Second of all, even if they did have it in their hand, they could draw a card back.
Yeah. You've it's so bad. All you've done is taken the quality of their hand and reduced it by a bit. But you've spent an entire card to
forestall the inevitable complaints. You can't name artifacts, so that was not the exact card I should have used as an example. But
okay,
you get the idea. What if they have a Chandra?
Sure.
So I'm going to give Lost Legacy an F and recommend that you never put this card in your deck.
Okay, F for Lost Legacy. Next is Marionette Master, which, by the way, I had this too, and it is a pretty nice combo with Illuminate the Competition. Marionette Master is 4 black for a human artificer. It's a 1/3. That's right. We've got a 6 mana 1/3 here. And she's rare, but she's got Fabricate 3. Okay. So that's big, right? Right there. That's, you can have a 4/6 or you can have 3 1/1s and a 1/3 for your 6 mana. And whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. Kind of weird.
Marionette Master is a very good card. Had a game involving multiple of these they're on both sides, and it is tricky to navigate. Basically, you want her with as much power as possible because she punishes your opponent the most when your artifacts dies.
Yeah.
But if you choose her as a 4/6, you might not have artifacts that are going to die very easily. So I think you're still going to fabricate more often than not.
That's what I did. I cast her 3 times today, and I fabricated into servos every time.
And so 6 mana for 4/6 worth of stats, broken up among 1/1, 1/1, 1/1, and 1/3, where when the 1/1s die, your opponent gets drained for 1, and when other random artifacts die, your opponent gets drained for 1.
Well,
that's
not drained, but
not drained. They lose a life. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's still a very good deal. And she randomly has combos if you had a way to increase her power some other way.
Yeah, I think she's good. I would give Marionette Master like a B-. I think. Like, she's still 6 mana. I like what she did to the board, but also it wasn't like the type of card that I cast and felt like, well, now I can't lose. It's like, okay, my board's really stable. I have this minor upside. I can do things with these tokens, but a 4/6, body for 6 mana would be a C- or a D+ on its own. This one, of course, lets you build out a board and kind of stabilize a bit more. But I have her a B- for Marionette Master.
I'm going to give Marionette Master a B. I think she's going to stabilize the board a little bit better than that, but still not a huge difference.
Midnight Oil. This is one of the weirdest cards I've seen in a while, Luis. And I'm still trying to figure out how it actually pans out. But it's 2 black for an enchantment. It says, Midnight Oil enters the battlefield with 7 hour counters on it. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card and remove 2 hour counters from Midnight Oil. Your maximum hand size is equal to the number of hour counters on Midnight Oil, and whenever you discard a card, you lose a life.
All right, Midnight Oil is a B, so let's move on.
It is not. It's really bad, right? Like, isn't it just an F?
All right, so here's what Midnight Oil does.
At least in limited?
To break that down. You get to draw 2 cards a turn. That's the upside.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And even when you run out of counters on Midnight Oil, you still keep drawing extra cards. At no point does it not draw you an extra card. Eventually, your hand size becomes 0, your maximum hand size, which means at the end of your turn, you discard all your cards.
Does it actually become 1?
No. You go from 1 counter to 0 counters, because even if you can't remove 2 hour counters, you'll remove 1.
Oh, you will remove 1 even if you can't. Okay, I see. I thought that one would stay because it says remove 2. So I figured, well, you can't remove 1.
This card is one of the most bizarre cards I've ever seen.
I know, it's so confusing.
I would never defend the choices made on this card, but
somebody had an idea.
But it does go eventually make your hand size go to 0. If your hand size goes to 5, then 3, then 1, then 0.
Okay.
So, and then if you don't play your cards, you have to discard them, and then you lose a life. So I think that there's room for this card to be a niche card in like a really low curve deck. I just don't see that happening very often because there's so many drawbacks associated with this card. One is, of course, that your hand size becomes low and you're going to start discarding. Then you start paying life for that discard. And if the game goes on too long, you might deck, though that's less of an issue in the kinds of decks that will play Midnight Oil. I feel like if your deck has all 1 and 2 mana spells and Midnight Oil, maybe you can get away with it. But
I've never seen a deck like that, though. Well,
or maybe some 3s, For the most part, I would avoid burning the Midnight Oil.
Yeah, I think so too. Looking at it, there has to be a deck that can take advantage of a powerful effect that you can work around, but it just feels like that deck comes up so never in limited. Like, you take a look at your average limited deck, and they don't curve out at 3 ever, right? I mean, this is not how limited works. Like, there's powerful cards at 4, 5, and 6 mana that you're going to want to play. And if you're playing those and Midnight Oil, it feels like you're going to get drowned here. I'm tempted to just give it an F, but I'll admit that I have to play with this card before I see it. So my plan right now is to lose to it a couple times and then come around, or to never see it again and never care.
All right. I'm going to give Midnight Oil F with an asterisk, the asterisk being maybe this does might something. Be an A. But it's just so, it's never going to be an A, but it's just so weird. So Midnight Oil, F asterisk. Okay. That'll throw the spreadsheets off.
Yeah.
I'll go next.
You like this one. All right.
We've got Noxious Gearhulk.
Mm-hmm.
It's 4 black for an artifact creature construct. It's a 5/4. It's a mythic rare. It's got Menace, and when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness.
Wow.
So yeah, when we talk about game winners, cards that are good while you're behind, good while you're ahead, good while you're at parity, Noxious Gearhulk's the kind of card I mean. This is just the classic.
I'm in love.
The classic A.
There's solidest A ever. What a great card.
Yeah, there's just no way to go wrong with this card. It just does it all. So, Noxious Gearhulk, drafted.
Oh, God. I love that card. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's an A. Syndicate Trafficker. What does this one do?
It's a 1 and a black for a 3/1. It's an Aetherborn Rogue at rare. So 2 mana, 3/1. And you can pay 1 colorless mana and sacrifice an artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on Syndicate Trafficker and make it indestructible until end of turn. It's an interesting card. It's by itself passable. I mean, you can play 2 mana 3/1s, and that's fine. Its ability is good if you can work towards it, but the threat of activation is very real on this. When you attack Syndicate Trafficker into their 4/4 or their 2/4 or whatever, they're often just not going to block because they don't want you to sacrifice, your random Prophetic Prism or your Servo or whatever you have lying around to make it into a 4/2 indestructible. So even though its ability is costly, sacrificing an artifact is not cheap. It will you kind of get it for free a good amount of the time.
It's funny because this to me is a type of card that, like, if that was an uncommon, I'd be like, okay, that's got a lot going on, but whatever. And I think the power level is somewhere in that range as well. Seems fine.
There are some decks that don't want it more than others.
Threat of activation's real.
The threat of activation is very real. That's the main thing, is that your opponent is just not going to walk into this. Often you're just going to attack for 3, they take it, then you play your card. Attack for 3, they take it. It's going to function a lot like a 3-power, functional like a 3-power indestructible creature, without you having to feed it artifacts. You can also start feeding it artifacts to deal extra damage if you want to.
Yeah.
So
the vehicle thing matters too. High-powered creatures like this can crew vehicles very easily.
He can also. I think the conceit is that he's selling whatever it is he's sacrificing. He can also sell the vehicles. He's a.
That's true. There are times when vehicles are just doing nothing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So used car salesman, Syndicate Trafficker. What do we want to? Is this a B-, a C+?
It's a C+ or a B-.
Yeah.
I like it. I think I like it at a C+.
Okay.
And there are some decks where if you pick up enough Fabricate and Prophetic Prisms and Black Puzzle Knots or whatever, this will edge its way towards the B territory. But it's not a card I'm going to first pick.
Okay. C+. That's going to do it for black. Let's move on to red, where we've got...
Well, black had, I just want to note, Demon of Dark Schemes and Noxious Gearhulk. So
2 mega bombs at 6 mana.
Black had some absurd high end. And speaking of which... our first red, rare, or mythic here is Chandra.
Is this card
Defiance. Good? Well, let's see. She's 2 red. She's a Planeswalker. She's a mythic rare. She starts with 4 loyalty. So 4 mana for 4 loyalty. And she has 4 abilities. The +1 is exile the top card of your library. You may cast that card. Again, you can't play lands. You have to actually cast it if it's a spell. You can't play land off this ability. If you don't cast the card, Chandra deals 2 damage to each opponent. It has, so she also has +1. Add red to your mana pool. Okay,
so 2+ abilities.
-3, Chandra deals 4 damage to target creature. So this is the really headlining ability for limited play. And then -7 to get an emblem that says whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to target creature or player. So you can evaluate most Planeswalkers as if they did not have the emblem, and you'll have a pretty accurate view.
The ultimate, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the ultimate, and I think Chandra's not really an exception there. It's just not going to decide very many games, but it's a good one if you get there.
No, but like you said, it's the -3 that's really the headliner, because usually you will have played a creature or 2, then play Chandra, kill their best thing, and say go, and you're just sitting there with a Planeswalker, a couple of creatures to defend her, and she's ready to just draw you extra cards or ramp you out something big or do whatever you want to do. Card's amazing.
Yeah, Chandra ticks all the boxes I want on a Planeswalker, which is the ability to defend himself, a plus ability that gets you up a card, and reasonable cost and loyalty. She's like very high on all those scales. So yeah, Chandra gets an A. I mean, Chandra's amazing.
Easy A. Now we've got the red Gearhulk. Speaking of mythic rares again, this is Combustible Gearhulk. What does this one do?
Combustible Gearhulk is 4 red for an artifact creature construct at Mythic Rare. It's a 6/6 first strike. So 6 mana, 6/6 first strike.
I like that.
When Combustible Gearhulk enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards.
Okay.
If the player doesn't, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then Combustible Gearhulk deals damage to that player equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards.
Spin the wheel, huh?
This is a very funny, because the Gearhulk cycle is these like 5, Gear Hulks that have a keyword that makes sense for their color, and then a come into play ability that has that makes sense for their color, except for Combustible Gear Hulk, where the come into play ability is just what?
What is just weird, right? I guess it does, like it's a browbeat style.
Yeah, it just thing. I think that the other 4 are like very cool and clean, and you're just like, wow, that's awesome. And then Combustible Gear Hulk, you're just kind of sitting there like, all right. Yeah.
But they're both powerful. I think that for the most part, like assuming that you're not at 3 life or whatever, you're probably not going to give your opponent the cards and just going to hold your breath. I mean, and take some damage.
Is you're gonna. I actually for my written set review, I actually like looked at a couple limited deck cost curves and averaged it out.
Yeah,
and you're taking like close to 4 damage.
Like 3 to 4 is what I would guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this is not an amazing card. 6 mana, 6/6. Like if it was 6 mana, 6/6 first strike, when it comes to play, deal 4 to your opponent, we would not be over the moon about this card.
No.
And it's way closer to that than anything else, because you're just not going to get to draw 3 cards if your opponent's at any reasonable life total.
That's right. So, and I think that it is appropriate to compare this to like the black one that we snapped off as an A, right?
Right.
Because of that same reason is that this one can't, like, it's still good. I mean, look, I would first pick this. Like, it's still a really good card, but I don't think it's on the same level as Noxious Gear Hulk is.
No. I would say Combustible Gear Hulk's like a B-.
Yeah, I think it's a B.
It's 6 mana, 6/6 first strike is mostly what you're paying for, and that's fine.
I like that though. I think that's pretty good. I played stupid Ulvenwald Observer or whatever, and this one has some immediate upside. And also, I mean, God, sometimes you just get to mise them, right? They're like, whatever. It's on average.
They'll take 9,
Yeah, it's like, I take 3.7. Like, well, this time. So I like a Combustible Gear Hulk at B.
All right, I'll still keep it at B-.
Alrighty. Fateful Showdown is 2 red for an instant at rare. It says it deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of cards in your hand. Discard all the cards in your hand, then draw that many cards.
So if you have 5 cards in your hand before you cast this, you'll deal 4 because this leaves your hand.
That's right. Well, it's on the stack, and then you'll draw 4. Interesting card.
Yeah, I think it's a good card.
I do too.
It's not that hard to maneuver into a situation where this is dealing 3 or 4 damage, and then you're getting, on average, an upgrade in card quality because you cast your 2 good cards, and then you just cast this to discard 2 medium cards in a land or something, or 2 medium cards in 2 lands.
Totally.
So I like Fateful Showdown. Nothing too special going on here. And a horrible top deck. Though if you have Fateful Showdown in your deck, do not play land number 7 if you don't need it. That's I
agree. Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. Is that I normally am actually an advocate for playing your lands for the most part, especially if you have any card draw deck cards in your deck. But I think for Fateful Showdown, definitely keep that in mind to keep those lands, because that can mean the difference between the game. If you draw 3 lands in a row, you feel like you're flooding, and then you're like Fateful Showdown off the top, you're going to be like, wow, I just drew 3 and killed killed something. So I don't know where to grade it. It's probably like a B-.
Yeah, I like Fateful Showdown at B. I think a B.
Maybe a B. Yeah, I don't know. It's a little variable, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, Fateful Showdown gets a B from me.
Lathnu Hellion is 2 and a red for a 4/4 Hellion with haste. And when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. There has to be something bad, right? Yes, there is. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Lathnu Hellion unless you pay 2 energy.
Lathnu Hellion is quite good in an aggressive deck. If you play Lathnu Hellion, attack your opponent for 4, and they take 4, and then you pay the 2 energy, then you attack them for 4 again.
It's pretty good already.
3 mana to deal 8. Also, on that second attack, your opponent can't just be like, well, I'm just going to take it because it's going to die in a turn. Because if they do that, and then you just go Thriving Grubs, pay for Lathnu Hellion, all of a sudden, like they're in just a ton of trouble. So you do have to be aggressive. This is not a card you want to ever sit there without attacking. It's not a very good blocker. It just drains your energy reserves too quickly.
Yeah, and your opponent can just sit there like, hey, yeah, whatever, I want to attack for a few turns.
But it's such an aggressive card and such a good card when you are beating down that I like Lathnu Hellion. I think it's a solid card. It is, you have to know what your deck's trying to do, but in a deck that wants to beat down, this card is very good, and I would still play it even if I didn't have energy if my deck was aggressive.
Yeah, I like it too. I'm going to give it a B- though. I'm not in love with it. I mean, I guess if we want to put the caveat that it's only in an aggressive deck, then I like it better than that. But I think that draft in and draft out, when you look at this card, you really do have to evaluate, well, what am I doing here? Because if you're not trying to thump, then I think the Lothnu Hellion probably isn't a high pick at all.
Yeah, I like Lothnu Hellion at B-.
All right. Madcap Experiment. 3 and a red for a sorcery. It's rare. It says reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an artifact card. Put that card on the battlefield, right on the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Madcap Experiment deals damage to you equal to the number of cards revealed this way. Oh, no. No.
So there's 2 things you can do with Madcap Experiment. You can cram your deck full of as many artifacts as possible, in which case casting this will net you probably like a
puzzle mana.
It's 2 mana artifact and you paid a couple life.
And 4 mana.
Or you can use it to try to get a sick like a Gear Hulk out, in which case you're going to flip so many cards that you're just going to die to it.
Oh, God.
No, do not play Madcap Experiment.
No.
Save that for the people in Modern getting their Platinum Empyreans or whatever.
You know,
just this card's an F. Move on.
F. Pia Nalar. Mom.
Yeah, she's 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary human artifact artificer. She's rare. When she enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter with flying. She has two activated abilities. One is 1 and a red, target artifact creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Okay. The other is 1 colorless mana and sacrifice an artifact. Target creature can't block this turn. Yeah, Pia Nalar. I almost want to call her Pia and Kieran Nalar because that's the card we've been playing with for like 2 years. But yeah, Pia Nalar is very, very good. She's will great. Always be happy to have her. Basically, by herself, she's 3 mana for a 2/2 plus a 1/1 flyer. Good. And with extra mana, that 1/1 flyer becomes a 2/1 or a 3/1 and trades up. Yeah. You can also throw artifacts at their blockers to distract them. She combines well with other artifacts that you're kind of randomly picking up. So not an earth-shattering card. This isn't a bomb, but she's very good.
I actually think I think she's like a B+.
Yeah, B+ is exactly what I'd give Pia Nalar.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Skyship Stalker. 2 red for a 3/3 flying dragon at rare. Already good. And then it has 3 different activated abilities. They each cost red. So you can pay red and the Stalker gets +1/+0 until end of turn, aka fire breathing. You can pay a red to give it first strike until end of turn, and you can pay a red to give it haste. It's all good news.
Skyship Stalker is great. It's secretly like a 5/5 flying haste dragon or a 5/3 flying haste dragon. Just you have the option of also playing it as a 4 mana 3/3 flying.
Yeah. Card's great.
Which is awesome. That's just better than the other version, right? Like
good.
You can pay a couple extra mana to smash for 5 red away, but if on turn 4 you can also just play Skyship Stalker. Late game, it's a 7 or 6 power first striker. The Skyship Stalker is just no bad things to be said about this at all, except for the fact that I guess it has 3 toughness, so maybe sometimes it'll get taken down by a Welding Sparks or whatnot, but. Skyship Stalker is kind of what you think about when you think about, sweet rares. I'm going to give it an A-, though.
I give it an A- also.
I think that there are some times when it's not going to, like, bring you back. It's pretty mana-intensive. It's not going to bring you back into the game if you're really far behind.
Yeah, card's great. Let's see. It looks like we've got one more rare for red. It's Territorial Gorger, which is 3 and a red for a gremlin. It's a 2/2 with trample. It's rare. It says whenever you get 1 or more energy counters, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn.
Doesn't really feel like a rare to me.
So it's basically like each time you get energy, it gets pumped up temporarily.
It's for each instance of you getting energy. So if when you play a Thriving Grubs and get 2 energy, this gets +2/+2. It does not get +4/+4.
Right.
But if you trigger your Demon of Dark Schemes, this will get +2/+2 for each creature that dies. So that's a pretty sick combo.
I don't think that's what we're trying to do here. I'm like reading it like, wait, what?
Basically, Territorial Gorger reads to me as a card you'd put in an energy deck that attacks as a 4 mana 4/4 trample a good amount of the time, and sometimes won't be able to. It'll just be a 2/2. Man, if you're really lucky, it'll be a 6/6.
I don't know. Like cards like this because it straddles like it's nowhere in between, right? A 2/2 trample for 4, I'm not interested in at all, and a 4/4 trample for 4, I'm really interested in, right? So it's like how much energy do I actually have to make this thing work? I mean, you don't even have to spend the energy. You just have to get it. It's probably worth it if you have 5 or 6 energy makers. You just run this thing, even if sometimes it's a 2/2 trample, a 2/2 for 4 that really is embarrassing.
Well, yes, except you also still need to be aggressive because your like red-green energy control deck, if such a thing exists, is not going to necessarily want to rumble over for 4 if you can't block. So
I don't know, man. I can just see this is one of those. You know what it kind of feels like to me? Almost is like landfall, right? Where like when we played with landfall, they play a land. And then, you're going to take some hits from a landfall creature that gets bigger with landfall. But then you think, well, they'll run out of lands eventually. They just never did. I wonder if that's how Territorial Gorger is going to feel. It's like, okay, I get it. You hit me for 4. And then the next turn, like, okay, fine. You had another energy creature. I take 4, but now it's going to be dead. It's just going to be a 2/2 that's dwarfed by my other creatures. But maybe, you can actually put together a deck where you can just consistently hit. Because, you don't have to hit that many times with it before it's great. By the time you're swinging the 3rd time with a 4/4 trample for 4, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, but if this was just a 4-mana 2/2 trample landfall +2/+2, I wouldn't be in love with it. And I think energy is harder to trigger than landfall. So that makes me want to give Territorial Gorger like a D+.
Yeah. Here's another way. I found another way for me to frame it. If this was 5 mana, so just 4 and a red for a 4/4 trample. Shrug. It's fine, right? We'd probably give that a C.
Right.
This has the advantage of sometimes being effectively that card, but with haste. And then other times it's not even close to that card. So I think it's just worse.
All right. Yeah, I can buy that. There are some decks where this card will be quite the threat, but I think most decks are just not going to want Territorial Gorger.
All right.
So yeah. we'll give it a D+.
Yeah, D+, something like that. I think you'll know when you want it. All right. So that's going to do it for red. So that moves us on to green, where we've got Architect of the Untamed as our first rare. It's a 2 and a green for a 2/3 elf artificer druid at rare, and it's got landfall. It doesn't say that because landfall is not the kind of ability that they put that on, but it's whenever a land enters a battlefield under your control, you get an energy counter, and you can pay, what is that, 8 energy?
It is 8.
To create a 6/6 colorless beast artifact creature token. So this is a cool one. We've got, a relatively tame 2 and a green for a 2/3. Sure. And then it generates energy just by doing things that you're going to do anyway. So it's basically free on that level, which is great. And then it even has this really cool upside that's a very real payoff, right? I mean, it's a lot of energy to pay, but a 6/6, beast artifact token is no joke.
I like Architect. She works well in an energy deck because she fuels other energy cards and gives you a good big energy sink, though.
Yeah.
8 is a lot. I would expect most games where you play Architect, you don't end up making a beast, but the option that to make one is very good. It means that if you play your Riparian Tigers or your Thriving Rhinos, then all of a sudden you might get to 8 faster than you might think. But for the most part, a 3-mana 2/3 that generates energy, I think would already be a card a lot of decks would want in this format. And
I think so
having
too.
that big energy sink there is just, pretty substantial upside. So I like Architect. She's the kind of card I wouldn't mind taking early because she's so good in the energy deck. Later in the draft, if you're like black-green artifacts or whatever, you're not going to be like, okay, Architect Untamed is going right in, because if she's your only energy card, she's fairly poor. But if you have 3 to 5 other energy cards, I think she pulls her weight, because a 3-mana 2/3, you're not paying a ton of a cost there.
Yeah, I feel like you're going to end up going either all in for the beast token, or you're just going to find ways to use that energy consistently throughout the course of the game. And I think either way is totally fine.
Yeah, you're going to end up with 5 energy, right? And decide now, okay, am I going to start spending this on +1/+1 counters, or just try to hold out till I get to 8?
Yeah, so my guess is that you'll end up doing the counters more often, just if you have the places to spend it, and the time when you use the beast is if you just don't have anywhere to spend it. You're like, all right, well, we'll start saving up energy counters for a beast.
This feels like a B- to me.
Yeah, I think that's good. B- right in that range for Architect of the Untamed. Next is Bristling Hydra, which is 2 GG for a Hydra. It's a 4/3, and when it enters a battlefield, you get 3 energy. So, wow, our first 2 rares are energy-centric. That's interesting. You can also pay 3 energy to put a +1/+1 counter on Bristling Hydra, and it gains hexproof until end of turn.
Bristling Hydra is great.
That's really good.
It's a stats-wise, it's already just a 4-mana 5/4, which would already be like a B, just because of how big that is.
Yes.
And the fact that it gets hexproof when you need it to, and it generates energy you could spend on other cards or uses energy from your other cards. I'm not going to go so far as to call Bristling Hydra an A, but I think B plus is a solid card.
Yeah, I think
it might
so
be an
too.
A-. It might be an A-, honestly. Like it's a 4-mana 5/4 hexproof in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
like,
I would go B plus on it because it is very difficult to interact with. You know, the thing that I think it would push it in the A range if it had trample, like if it made it so that the clock that it put on was so harsh that, you know, like that maybe activating it once or twice meant the game was just over. Here, it's like close to that, but you can chump block it. You can throw a bunch of creatures in front of it and keep yourself alive for a while to play something big yourself. So I'd give Bristling Hydra a B plus, but whatever. I mean, this thing's just great. Like that's just a super solid card, especially for 4 mana. Cultivator of Blades. This one, they spoiled this one pretty early. It's 3 GG for a 1/1 Elf Artificer at rare, but it's got Fabricate 2, so you can effectively have a 3/3 for 5 or 3 1/1s for 5 mana. And when it attacks, you may have other attacking creatures get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Cultivator of Blades power.
This is another one of the cycle of whether you fabricate onto it or make servos, you're getting bonuses either way. Because if you play this as a 5-mana 3/3, it's a 5-mana 3/3 that attacks and gives +3/+3 to all your other attacking creatures. But if you make the servos and you attack, you all of a sudden have multiple attacking 2/2s. And you can obviously get a lot bigger if you just play a pump spell on Cultivator of Blades before you attack. Interesting card. It's okay. It's the kind of thing that's actually okay when you're behind because it's 5 mana for 3 1/1s, which at least can block.
Yeah.
But by itself, it's actually not that impressive, right? Because it's either a 5 mana 3/3 that doesn't do anything if you have no other creatures in play, or a 5 mana 1/1 that when it attacks makes your other 2 1/1s into 2/2s, which so you kind of need a board to be developed before a cultivator really does something.
Yeah, and you mentioned it that they can attack as 2/2s, but I mean that requires the Cultivator of Blades herself attacking, and you can't figure that she's going to survive combat very often, without some help. It's just a 1/1.
It strikes me as a card you're going to play as a 5 mana 3/3 most of the time because you get so much more of a bonus, and you want a couple of you'll have two other random creatures in play. Play this as a 3/3, and then next turn attack for a ton of damage.
Yeah, and then she might survive. Ability. Yeah, that's really powerful. I agree with you. I think that's what's going to happen for the most part with Cultivator of Blades. You're probably just going to put the counters on it, and as you mentioned, by the way, make sure that if your plan is to use a combat trick that you do it before you attack with Cultivator. If you attack first, the trigger's going to go on and it'll be too late.
Well, to play around them tapping it, you could attack in response to the trigger, cast the combat trick, and then when it resolves, it'll be bigger. But yeah,
good point. Yeah, I guess I meant you know what I meant. Like just don't do it after attacks. Still, card seems really good to me.
Yeah, that leaves Cultivator at a B for me.
Yeah, I think B. I actually, I'd go B plus on Cultivator. Like, I like the ability to stabilize a board a bit by having.
I guess a 5 mana 3/3 suspend 1 overrun is pretty good.
Yeah, so that card's good.
All right, B plus on Cultivator of Blades.
Which next card? So I have questions. Yeah, can you read this to me? And I got some questions on this one.
All right, so Dubious Challenge is 3 and a green. It's a sorcery at rare. Look at the top 10 cards of your library, exile up to 2 creature cards from among them, then shuffle your library. So you look at the top 10 and pick out 2 creatures. Target opponent may choose one of the exiled cards and put it onto the battlefield under his or her control. Put the rest, aka the other one, onto the battlefield under your control. So you look at your top 10 cards, try to hit 2 creatures, your opponent gets first pick and you get second? I mean, this card's just a flat F. It's a funny card. It's provoked a lot of discussion, but there's no way this is remotely close to playable.
Now, so it says put the rest onto the battlefield under your control. Does that just mean the other creature?
It just means the other creature.
It doesn't mean the other of the 10 cards, right?
No, your opponent's not forced to pick a creature, so you can't make a Dubious Challenge Phage deck. And so if your opponent somehow opts not to take a creature, you would get 2, but that's just not going to happen. Dubious Challenge is terrible. It's not
okay. What I was asking is, it says look at the top 10 cards of your library, exile up to 2 creature cards from among them, and then shuffle. But are we assuming that we shuffle in the other 10 then? Is that what's happening? Or the other 8? Okay.
Yeah, that is what happens.
Because put the rest onto the battlefield under your control feels weird to me. But anyway, whatever.
I feel like you have dubious understanding of what this card does.
Yeah, I read this card 3 times and I'm like, I don't even know what it's trying to do, but it seems god awful to me.
Yeah, this is not a card for limited play.
Okay, well let's give it an F. Dubious
F plus
challenge.
even.
Yeah. Oh no, the dreaded F plus has arrived. That poor thing.
Well, it's okay. We have a palette cleanser here. Nissa Vital Force. So she's 3 green for a Planeswalker, Mythic. Starts with 5 loyalty. So 5 mana, 5 loyalty. +1, untap target land you control. Until your next turn, it becomes a 5/5 elemental creature with haste. -3, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. -6, you get an emblem with whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So you get landfall, draw a card permanently.
Wow. So there's a few things that jump off the card here. The first one is that the +1 ability, critically does say until your next turn, right? That's not the end of, not until the end step, but until your next turn. So this 5/5 land can actually block and protect Nissa if you'd like. The other thing that jumps off the screen is how quickly that ultimate pops up. She comes down at 5 loyalty +1, and then the next turn you can just ultimate Nissa to give yourself that landfall draw card if you think that that's going to be the way to win the game, which is, I think, a really cool space to be in, right? Normally we think of ultimates as being these like march up the chain for 3 or 4 turns and then kind of, oops, I won the game. But Nissa's is much more middle ground than that. Like the emblem is very powerful and could very well win you the game, but it certainly doesn't the moment that you do it, like many of the ultimates. And as a result, it's also easier to get to. This card's great. Wow, what a sweet card.
Yeah, most, we said most Planeswalkers you can evaluate without the ultimate. This is not true. You do need to. The ultimate's a big part of this card because it happens so quickly. So I was just thinking, would you play 3 green sorcery? You get an emblem with that ultimate. How good would that be? I don't actually know how good that would be. So it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's that's like a classic one of those cards that, like, yeah, sure, if you're alive,
yeah,
right. But you also just took it, a lot of turn and a lot of mana off. So if you're far behind, it's going to be really tough. I don't think I would grade that card very highly, like an enchantment or whatever that was 3 GG. Yeah.
You need to play 3 lands to get your value out of it. Nissa is much more than that. It's just kind of curious.
Of course,
like
that is really interesting. Yeah.
Should you ultimate her? So Nissa provides a huge threat. Obviously, if they have no creatures in play, she's just going to run them over, right? Because you just +1 attack for 5, and then your opponent's just beyond dead. But Planeswalkers, they're good against empty boards, so that's not a huge selling point for me. What I like is that if they don't have flyers, that 5/5 is going to punish them so much for attacking. Like they have 2 3/3s out, and you play Nissa and +1 her and don't attack. Next turn, they can throw away a 3/3 to knock Nissa down to 3, but you're already up a card at that point because you can just +1 Nissa again and play another creature, and then all of a sudden your opponent is in a pretty tough spot. The -3 is a really good draw card because you're drawing a good card, basically the best of your cards that died this game. And the ultimate seems like a thing that could happen. I would suspect it's more likely correct if you go Nissa +1, she doesn't take any damage, next turn +1 again, and then ultimate the turn after, but it's going to depend on the game. If you play Nissa on +1 and they can't kill her, but then they play a 3/3 flyer, I'm much more inclined to just go, all right, I'm just going to ultimate now to make sure, I can win any long game. Because that emblem will win you any game that goes like 3 or 4 more turns.
Yeah, that's the real key to it. And of course, in comparison to the enchantment that you and I made up, the beautiful thing about Nissa Vital Force is that you get to just look at the board that she's on and say, is this a type of game where an emblem like this will win me the game, right? Are we relatively stalled out? Are things going to be going on for quite a while? Then yeah, make the emblem and start drawing cards because like you said, that's going to win you the game. But in the times when it's not, you've got a 5/5 elemental, you can get back a key removal spell from your graveyard, kill the opposing creature.
You can get back permanents.
Okay,
but,
so maybe what's it called?
You of course were referring to malfunction or revoke privileges.
Yes, revoke privileges was exactly what I had in mind. Yeah, but or a blocker, bomb, or whatever, right? You can get something back to help you win the game, and the strength in Nissa Vital Force is the fact that you get to choose, right? Where the card that we were describing is narrow in the sense that there's going to be times when you really do want that enchantment that gives you landfall, draw a card, and there's going to be times where you would rather just tear it up out of your hand and replace it with a 2/2 for 2. So, Nissa's an A easily, not close.
All right, I'm gonna go in a mini explanation about flexibility because this card really does call that out, like you said. Mm-hmm. Flexibility, I think, is one of the more underrated powers in Magic. Like when people ask, like you look at a card. The go-to example I use is Fire Ice. This is a split card which you can cast for 1 in a blue to tap target permanent and draw a card, or 1 in a red to deal 2 damage divided as you choose. Mm-hmm. This doesn't sound like an insane card, but this card has been playable in Vintage for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And that just shows the power of flexibility. Nissa is doing multiple things that attack on different angles, like defending yourself with the 5/5, attacking them with the 5/5, drawing cards with the emblem and the middle ability. And all that flexibility together is what makes Nissa an A, even though any one of these abilities by themselves, like they add up to much more than some of their parts, because she can play any kind of game you want. The only kind of game Nissa can't really play is when your opponent has 3 Thopter tokens out. Then you're just like, okay, this is just not going to do all that much. But overall,
still just smash them, just +1 attack. That's fine. Like they can't race that.
+1 attack. Then next turn maybe you just -3 Nissa and get a card, so you got 5 damage in a card for 5 mana.
Like a removal spell, or
yeah, exactly. Like Nissa's a pretty easy A because power plus flexibility is just always the recipe.
Yeah, and she has both of those in spades. Let's take a look at Avia Peshiri, Sage Lifecrafter. This is green for a 1/2 legendary human artificer. And you can pay 2 and a green and tap to make a 1/1 colorless servo. So you basically pay 3 mana tap to make a 1/1. And you can pay 4 and a green and tap to make an XX colorless construct artifact creature token, where X is a number of creatures you control.
So historically, we've been pretty down on cards that have abilities that look like this, like Whirler Maker, for example, the 3 colorless artifact that says 4 tap, put a 1/1 Thopter into play. Look, I played that in Sealed, and I can confirm it is slow. It is not the kind of card I think you can really realistically play in draft.
Okay.
The reason that Avia here is a lot better is that you pay almost nothing to put her into play. Like she kind of sneaks into play for free, because 1 mana often will either come out on turn 1, you have no other 1-drops, or you'll play her on turn 4 when you have a 3-drop. Like she doesn't actually cost you very much. Like not only is 1 small to begin with, often you can play her on a turn where you just wouldn't use that 1. So
yeah, you can sneak her on turn 3 when you play a 2-drop plus her, that kind of thing.
Given that, these abilities are good to have. I mean, if you ever have leftover mana, you can make a 1/1. If you get to the point where you have 3 creatures in play, 5 mana make a 4/4, which then becomes, fuels the next one. Like that, because the XX isn't dynamic. X is just, it's like when you make it, it looks like it's set at the time you make it. So yeah. I hope I'm not wrong about that, but that's what it looks like to me from reading the card. So you get to make, once you start making 4/4s and 5/5s, you can just win the game based on that. You don't need to do anything else. And all that for just 1 mana initial investment is very different than a card like Whirler Maker, which has a 3 mana initial investment, takes a whole turn, and doesn't do anything. She's a 1/2. We don't like 1/2s, but they can block 2/1s if you need them to. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, no, I think Avia is quite good. Like you mentioned it, you still do have to pay the relatively clunky cost, but this is the type of card that and on the right board can really dominate. Especially like if the board gets stalled out and you can start just pumping out these XX colorless constructs, and those things can absolutely take over if a board's stalled. And, there are times when even just creating a 1/1 servo can be good. You can trigger things that care about artifacts entering the battlefield or just having artifacts. And sometimes they're just good on the ground as little blockers against 1 toughness attackers and that kind of thing too. And you can preserve the cards in your hand while making relevant use of your mana. So I like this card a lot, actually. I think it's quite strong. It's one that can definitely get annoying in the long run, and doesn't punish you so bad if you're getting ran over, because like you said, ultimately she can still block something on the ground or help double block or whatever, and I like that. I think your comparison to that artifact is apt here, and she's way better.
It's why we're gonna give her probably a B.
I think I would give her a B.
Whirler Maker like a D.
Exactly.
If I remember correctly. Yeah. So Avia Peshiri, Sage Lifecrafter. She has so much more names than mana cost. They probably just made her cost so little because you just put the names there.
Oh man, it's funny because she fills up the name text just so she can be 1 mana, and then look at her type line text too. It goes right up to the set symbol. It's like,
all right. Well, she gets a B regardless.
Yeah, she gets a B.
Brings us to Verdurous Gearhulk.
What a dumb card.
3 green, artifact creature construct at Mythic Rare. The Gearhulks are all mythic. 4/4 trample. When Verdurous Gearhulk enters the battlefield, distribute 4 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. So I was talking actually at the pre-release about this to Josh Utter Layton because we were just looking at these different cards, and I was like, this is proof that you're allowed to put a lot of stats on a mythic, and there's just no fear anymore about making too big of a creature. You realize this is 5 mana for an 8/8 trample. Like, you can just put the 4 counters on this.
Yeah.
It's just 3 green 8/8 trample. Like,
it's completely insane.
And it's way better than that, because by distributing the counters on creatures that can attack, it's like the counters have haste, and you can mitigate your risk against removal or bounce, and you can like line up, interactions like they have 2 4/4s and you have 2 3/3s. All of a sudden, you can make it so you have 2 5/5s and kind of put them in a tougher spot. I guess they can double block in that case and take 5, and then you still have a 4/4 and a 5/5 left.
Yeah.
Like, this card is just it's just absurd. So, like most of the Gearhulks, I believe it just gets an A.
Yeah, I think so too. This one isn't quite as cute, but for raw numbers, you just can't go wrong with what this provides. I was talking to Woody about it. He had this in his pre-release deck as well, and he said people kept killing the rest of his creatures, and he had some plans about playing Verdurous Gearhulk and making his whole team big or whatever, and he's just like, oh, you can put these on the Gearhulk? All right. He just made an 8/8 and killed them.
It just feels like the kind of card that at some point in history would have not targeted itself, because you can't make a 5 mana 8/8. Now it's just like, yeah, just whatever, give them a 5 mana 8/8.
yeah. Let there be 5 mana 8/8 tramplers. All right, so A for Verdurous Gearhulk.
Ooh, I like the next one. It is called Wildest Dreams, and this actually does speak to my wildest dreams in Magic. It costs green XX. It's a sorcery, so at rare. So it returns X target cards from your graveyard to your hand and exiles itself. So you pay 3 mana to return 1 card, 5 mana to return 2 cards, and 7 mana to return 3 cards, and so on.
Okay.
It's the kind of card that can finish a game pretty well. If you're looking to cast this for about 7 mana, I think is going to be the most effective point, because casting it for 3 mana is kind of like an act of desperation. Casting it for 5 mana is good. I mean, 5 mana return two good cards, because they're cards that died. They're not lands, presumably.
Right.
Isn't bad. 7 mana is where I think you just lock up the game. It's not the kind of card you can just slot into any deck, but it does feel like a pretty good finisher. A finisher that you can cast if you're desperate for 3 mana to get back a removal spell, because this actually can do that.
Because this actually can, yeah.
I mean,
you want to be ramping, or?
You don't even have to necessarily be ramp, but you have to be a deck that's looking to play to the mid to late game. Like, a red-green beatdown deck is not going to be really in the market for this, though. It's still 5 mana to get back 2 removal spells, or a threaten a removal spell or something along those lines is not out of this world. Just modal cards are good, and this can be cost for 3, 5, 7, 9, and be great, at a lot of those costs and passable at 3. So
I still find it very medium.
Yeah,
it's like one of those. It's like a role player type card, right?
What it reminds me of is
Seasons Past, right? Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think it's a worse Seasons Past, because Seasons Past was 6 mana and got you back like 4 to 6 cards.
Yeah,
this is going to be like 7 mana for 3.
I don't know, man. I actually have this on par with Seasons Past. Like, the ability to get back a key card for 3 mana is something that Seasons Past just could never do, Like, I value the ability to cast this for 3 mana very, very highly in comparison to a card like Seasons Past, or in comparison to casting Wildest Dreams for 7 or whatever.
That is, well, yeah. Yeah, 7 mana. Though I dream of casting it for 7 targets.
Or 7 mana. Yes, I mean, yeah, and 7 mana. Like, I love that that's there, because I do agree with you. That's going to win the game in the most part if you find yourself in that type of game. But in a quicker game, in a game where this type of what I've done with Seasons Past is I've put it in my main deck, in the decks that I wanted to play it in. Usually it was like a green-black type deck, but I was willing to take it out of my deck if I felt like it was going to be a liability for too long and my opponent was being, too assertive. And with Wildest Dreams, I feel even more comfortable having it in there, because worst case, I can cast it for 3, which is very clunky. It is, but I can get something back and get back on board again and do that.
I guess if you cast it for 3 and get back a 2 or 3 mana removal spell, you kind of turn it into a 5 or 6 mana removal spell, which is a good fail case for your 7 mana finisher.
Exactly. And then in the times when you do find yourself in a grindy matchup or a longer game and you top deck Wildest Dreams and play it for 7, it's just like, okay, the game's, you're going to get back 3 cards and win the game. So I kind of dig it. I'm not like in love with the card, but I do plan on playing it probably more than I should. I don't know if I'm just like slam first picking it though.
It's the kind of card that's going to be very important in some decks and kind of marginal in others. I have it at like C plus, but
C plus is where I have it too.
I could see you being very happy to open this in pack 3, and you're like, blue-green energy control deck that has a lot of thriving turtles and whatnot.
Right. I think that we should give it also an asterisk on build around. Like if you do find yourself with one early, you want to make sure that you're not only building your deck to maximize it, but also that you're playing the game to maximize it. Trading off your creatures and your spells, using your spells more liberally usually makes sense when you have a card like Wildest Dreams in hand. So C plus on Wildest Dreams. That does it for green. What do you think about green?
Yeah, green has some good ones. I mean, everyone kind of gets a gimme except red with the Gear Hulk. But green does have, I think, some pretty reasonable rares otherwise. I think it's better at common, like relatively.
Agreed. Like the Riparian Tiger and the Pima Outrider and stuff.
Yeah, the green is just really did it at common, but that's okay. It's still got some good rares and mythics to back it up. Wily
Bandar.
Yeah, Wily Bandar is a card.
All right, so that's for green. Let's move on to white.
Yeah, we're starting with Aether Storm Rock. It's 2 white for a 3/3 flying bird at rare. So 4 mana, 3/3 flyer. Good start.
Yep.
Whenever
that's already a B.
Yes. Whenever Aether Storm Rock or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get an energy. Whenever Aether Storm Rock attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on the rock and tap up to 1 target creature defending player controls. This card is just absurd. It's by itself, it's going to often attack as a 4/4 that taps down any potential blocker they might have, and that buff becomes permanent. It's counters. So, because you're going to play this, get an energy next turn before you attack, you just play another creature and attack and tap down a creature, and you have a 4/4 attacker. So this is better than a 4 mana 4/4 flyer. And a 4 mana 4/4 flyer is approaching A territory.
Yeah,
so
it is. This card's just absolutely fantastic.
That's just one of the best cards in the set. It's just an A. You don't need any other energy cards to make this card great, though it does work nicely with other energy cards.
Yeah, it does.
You don't need to be aggressive to make this card great, though it's slightly better in an aggressive deck. Just everything about this card is awesome.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, that while Aether Storm Rock does clear the way for other attacks, the really important thing is the +1/+1 counter that you get, right? I mean, you're just building up this dragon that started on turn 4, and as long as you can keep attacking and getting those counters sunk into it, it's going to be a 4/4 and a 5/5, and then the game's going to be over. And yeah, you get to tap down something as well, so clearing the way for other attackers or for even itself if there's a flyer is a nice bonus, but I just like the idea of this thing just growing and growing and growing until your opponent's dead. So A for Aether Storm Rock. What about Angel of Invention?
This is 3 white for a 2/1 Angel at Mythic Rare. It's got Flying, Vigilance, and Lifelink, as well as Fabricate 2.
Dear God.
Yes. And it has the text, other creatures you control get +1/+1. So this is,
what?
Again, similar to Cultivator of Blades, where you can play this and put the counters on it, and then you end up with 5 mana, 4/3 Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink. Fantastic card.
Yeah.
Or you can get 2 servos, and then it has the text, no matter which mode you choose, of other creatures you control get +1/+1. So then you end up with a 2/1 and 2 2/2s, plus all your other creatures are getting a bonus.
So you get 6 power instead rather than 4, but then only 2 of it. Because this is interesting. You brought up this point a few times during the Commons and Uncommons review about, when the Fabricate cards have relevant abilities, you're incentivized to put the +1/+1 counters on it more than make the servos because you're maximizing on those +1/+1 counters. Do you think that that's true of Angel of Invention? Because they've also thrown this wrinkle in that says, well, you're also incentivized to make servos because they're bigger than normal servos.
Like Cultivator of Blades, I think that you're going to play Angel as just a 4/3 more often, because just paying you Vigilance, Lifelink, and Flying on those 2 +1/+1 counters is just such a high pay, or such a high bonus, that I would rather have a 4/3 Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink most of the time. The times when you don't want to do it are when you're just trying to go wide and your opponent has a bunch of blockers, when you're worried about a removal spell. Those are basically it. Or if your opponent has like a 3/3 flyer that you're not attacking past anyway. But for the most part...
Another thing that jumps to mind, Luis, is how many spells do 2 damage versus 3, like burn spells and such.
True. There's multiple commons and uncommons that can kill the 2/1 version that can't necessarily kill the 4/3. Okay. So there's also multiple that kill either version, but you can't really play around those. I think in general you're going to want to play this as a 4/3. I think it's also just a windmill slam because it's just a fantastic card. This also meets my criteria of you could take some abilities off this card and it would still be an A. So
yes. Yeah, it's definitely an A. It might even be an A plus. Talking about when you're behind, this card is fantastic. Either mode as well. I mean, you're a little bit more all in if you make the 4/3 flying Vigilance lifelink, but that's the kind of card that can easily turn around a game against a bunch of small creatures. And if you're behind against a different type of board, you can also just make 3 creatures, one of them being a 2/1 flying Vigilance lifelink. That is just absurd. For 5 mana, you just can't do better. It's Angel of Invention's definitely an A.
You also can play this in attack player creature, so it just has an impact immediately. So Angel Invention, a pretty easy A.
So it actually just hits literally all of the quadrant 3, right? It's good when you're behind. It's great when you're ahead. It's great when you're at parity because it pumps up your whole team and makes you not at parity. And in developing, if you play this on turn 5, you're just never losing. So
yeah,
A plus. I'm going to go A plus. Whatever. You did it, Angel Invention. I love you.
I haven't been using A plus in general, but if we did, I would have retroactively given it to like the black and the green Gearhulks and the Aether Stormrock. So, but whatever.
Well, I'm giving Angel Invention an A plus, and I'm not giving the Rock an A plus. I'm giving it a regular A.
All right, that's fair enough. The black and green Gearhulks are definitely A pluses though under this metric. They're both better than Angel of Invention. So,
I don't. Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right. We got plenty of shows to argue that.
You can't actually pick between them, but all right, let's get to something that's not an A or an A plus. Authority of the Console. This is white for an enchantment at rare. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you gain 1 life.
Oh no.
This is a constructed card. This is like, to play against mono red haste deck.
Yeah.
But in limited, what you're doing with this is presumably their creatures entering tapped means you get to attack better, and then you're gaining life. So those abilities don't really mesh well, and this is just not worth a card. I'm just going to give Authority of the Consoles an F. I just can't imagine playing this card.
It's just an F. Yeah, we can move on. Don't play
yes,
that
it stops them from crewing their vehicles on turn 1 with the turn they play their creature. But seriously, don't play this card.
Broke it.
The next I'm really interested.
This card is cool. I almost splashed for it at my pre-release. It's called Captured by the Consulate. It's 3 and a white for an aura rare. Enchant creature you don't control. The creature can't attack, but of note, it can block. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it has a single target, change the target to enchanted creature if able.
It basically turns their creature into a rogue spellskite that forces them to target it with everything.
Yeah, it does. It has to be the most annoying card ever. I wanted to play it just because it seemed like it would mess with my... Like, their next removal spell has to kill their own creature that you've already put an enchantment
Yeah, you wanted to play it because it seems absurdly good. I think
yes.
So the main drawback is that they can still block with it. So if you're green-white ground pounders and you put this on their 4/4, you're kind of just going to stare at it, and that's just not going to be what you want to do. But yeah, basically it blanks all their pump spells. They can only target their stupid captured creature with pump spells. And if they have multiple removal spells, they just at some point they have to bite the bullet and just kill their own creature, and you get a sick 2-for-1.
And it's the best kind of 2-for-1. It's the one that they have to do. They have to spend their mana on it. They have to.
You're getting a mana advantage and a card advantage. Under most circumstances. So.
You know what else is funny is that there's even some types of removal that it blanks, right? Like if they have revoke privileges.
Yeah, it doesn't help to cast that on the card.
No.
And they have to target it still.
So they just have to sit there and wait until they find some other way to get rid of their stupid creature.
Yeah, bounce is about the only way to get out of this without losing a bunch because bounce saves their creature. But
yeah,
in general, Captured by the Consulate is just I think an awesome card. I think it's just going to play really, really well. And just be aware that if you're a ground attacking deck, this is not going to be the best removal spell. But if you're a control deck or you're a deck with flyers, really anything that doesn't involve literally attacking with small creatures on the ground, then Captured by the Consulate is amazing. So
yeah, I like it. I'd just say B+ for it myself.
Yeah, I like B+ for Captured by the Consulate.
What about Cataclysmic Gearhulk? This is the white one. What does it do?
It's 3 whites. This is only 5 mana. Artifact creature construct at Mythic Rare. It's a 4/5 vigilance. So 5 mana, 4/5 vigilance. We're starting with our Thornhide Wolves with vigilance here.
Yeah, there's also that artifact in this set that you can.
Yeah, that you can pay a white
thing.
To get.
Yeah, so this is better than that, but let's keep it in perspective. It's not infinitely better than that. So what does it do?
When Cataclysmic Gearhulk enters the battlefield, each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, then sacrifices the rest. So it casts, for those of you who remember, casts Tragic Arrogance. The main difference is each player chooses their own side, so you don't get to completely destroy them by like choosing their worst creature for them to keep or anything like that. But it does force both players to reduce down to one creature and one artifact, essentially. It eliminates multiple enchantments and planeswalkers. I'm just going to assume that's not going to happen very often.
Okay.
It's because this is an artifact and a creature that plays to your favor. You get to keep this plus another artifact or this plus another creature by choosing it as an artifact, because you get to choose it as whichever one is most convenient for you.
I see.
And I think the Cataclysmic Gearhulk is quite good. It's going to reduce... Basically, you're going to be able to maneuver this in a situation where your opponent has like 3 creatures and you have 1. You play this, you keep the Gearhulk in your creature, and they have to lose 2 of their creatures. If they have artifacts out, it becomes a little easier for them too. Like if they have an artifact creature and 2 normal creatures, they get to keep the artifact creature and one of the normal creatures.
Right.
It is the sort of thing you can play into because you know it's coming. Like you trade down one of your creatures for their artifact creature in a trade that's like doesn't look favorable. Then you play the Gearhulk and you would have had to sack your creature. And now they have to sack an additional creature.
What if they just have a bomb out? Let's just say they have a 6/6 or whatever.
It never kills their best creature is the problem.
So that's an issue because Cataclysmic Gearhulk is pretty good. I mean, a 4/5 vigilance for 5 is solid stats, but there's going to be times when that's not the biggest thing on the battlefield.
Oh, for sure. I think in general this is going to be quite good. I don't think it's quite bomb level, but this feels like a solid B+ to me.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me too. It doesn't feel like it's quite on par with, the Verdurous Gearhulk or the Noxious Gearhulk, for example. But it does have a massive effect on the game for sure. What's next?
Next up is Fumigate.
Oh, geez. This one does have a massive effect on the game.
Yes. 3 white sorcery, destroy all creatures. You gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way, and it's a rare. So,
yep.
Historically, I have not liked sweepers in limited that much, especially the expensive ones, because the 5 or 6 mana sweeper, in order to set it up to get an advantage, your opponent, if they're wily, will kind of like cue into that, right? They're like, well, you didn't play a creature on turn 4. Okay, maybe I'll just attack you for 4 and pass without playing a creature, and then you end up trading like 1 for 1 or 1 for 2 and taking 8 damage. Fumigate actually gets around that quite nicely because you can kind of because you're going to gain like, 2 to 4 life a lot of the time, sometimes more, you can take like an extra turn worth of hits, which really makes this more powerful. And at 5 mana, this is kind of what we pay for sweepers these days. I think Fumigate's quite good, even though it gets around doesn't kill vehicles. You can actually spend, like if you have Fumigate draft vehicles, you can spend your turn 4 playing a vehicle, and your opponent's not going to have alarm bells go off. You spend your mana on turn 4. Why would they think a Fumigate's coming?
Right. But then, of course, the downside is that your opponent could also just play a vehicle. You play Fumigate, say go, they go, creature, crew my vehicle, attack you, and you're not really that happy.
Yeah, I think in general those cards are just going to be really good. It's just hard to go very wrong with this because it's such an emergency valve that if you have to press the red button and kill everything and gain 5 life, you're going to probably be in decent shape afterwards.
Also, we're playing 8/4s on Magic Online. You're playing in GPs and PTs and stuff. So we're used to players that are like thinking about, well, you didn't do something. There's also just a lot of times when you're playing and your opponent has no clue that Fumigate's coming, and they're just like, here's my entire hand. And you're like, all right, well, blow it up, go play a big bomb, and the game's kind of over.
Yep, and you can also play a creature into this. Like you're allowed to play a decent blocking creature, to keep the charade going.
And the truth is, you have to, which is part of the argument against sweepers that cost 5 mana specifically, is that you can't just do nothing until turn 5 or until turn 6 when you hit your 5th land or whatever. You're going to get ran over too often to make that a viable strategy. So you always have to play out a creature or 2 to make sure that you stay alive, and then try to maneuver the game to make Fumigate really good for you and less good for your opponent. And it usually ends up being closer than most people think, especially given the fact that A, there's vehicles that could punish you, and B, they get to be the first one to cast a creature and get going again and kind of get that upper hand back. So you do have to do some work to make these sweepers good, but they usually are. And like you said, the fact that they're a release valve is a really important piece of the puzzle here too, is that Fumigate is one of the few cards in the set that can get you out of a scenario where you're way behind on board. You're just getting trounced on the board, and there's just no creature in the set that buys you out of it, but Fumigate does. And that is powerful, and that does matter as well.
I also really like the idea of just drafting red-white vehicles when I have Fumigate, because like an aggro deck that gets to play an effective Wrath is pretty scary.
That is really scary, yeah. Also very good in sealed, as we've mentioned before as well. But I think Fumigate's really good. I can't decide between B plus and maybe even A minus. I honestly think that this card's going to be great. I'll go B plus on Fumigate.
All right, I'm going to give Fumigate an A minus.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing that bumped me down was the vehicle thing. I just hate the idea of my opponent having vehicles, and I'm like, my sweeper doesn't actually kill the things I need to kill. Master Trinketeer is 2 and a white for a 3/2 Dwarf Artificer at rare. It says servos and thopters you control get +1/+1, and you can pay 3 and a white to create a servo. Pretty straightforward little card here.
Yeah, this is just a solid card. It works by itself because it creates servos, so you end up, making 2/2s while the Master Trinketeer stays around, and obviously works with other cards too, because if you have other Fabricate cards or other Thopter creators, then you get to play the Trinketeer and your trinkets get +1/+1. So nothing wrong with this card. It's not absurd, but I think it's good.
I think it's borderline absurd. Do you not think this is absurd?
No, I just don't. I think that there's so much to spend your mana on in this set that you're not jamming the second ability all that often, but if you get to late game, it will just win you the game.
Okay.
And so I like cards like that because you pay 3 mana for a 3/2. You didn't really overpay. You have that static ability that's going to give you a bonus, and then you kind of win the late game with it. But it's also a card that there's just a lot of games you're going to play this, and you're just going to realize you just need to trade it off with their attacker. Like okay. you're not going to get to use the ability 4 times in most games. So I still have this as a very good card. I just don't think it's a bomb.
Yeah, I have it a little higher than that. Like I think there's going to be a significant number of times where you play Master Trinketeer, you say go, and your opponent's just like crap. And, you're playing against blue, white, or, there's a bunch of color combos, or there's a couple color combos that have a hard time killing it. And you just sit there, and as long as they're not killing you in the air, you just say land, go. And you just start spitting out 2/2s, and you're just paying 4 mana 2/2, 4 mana 2/2, 4 mana 2/2, and that's just going to win you the game if it isn't dealt with. And if they do, well, then you've got a handful of cards and a bunch of servos on the battlefield that are ready to go too. I could just see that playing out, especially in sealed, but even in draft as well.
Yeah, if you spend 8 mana on this, and then they kill it, and you end up with 2 1/1s. I mean, you got an okay deal, but you didn't really get over on them that much. Is kind of what
you got to be ahead though, right? Like you
got all those
they were
cards. Doing.
Yeah, that's true. They could have some.
I mean, if they just played like a Pima Outrider and then a Tiger and then killed this on turn 6, like.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anything in the world that can beat Pima Outrider. And
all right, if they just played a vehicle and then 5 mana 3/3 and then they killed this, I think you're still behind. So.
Okay, fair enough.
But still.
I disagree. I think, but because I still like you have two servos that can block, and then you've got. Basically, you're up 2 cards in hand as well. So I don't know. You're probably a little bit behind, but not terribly. I'm going to go B plus on Master Trinketeer.
All right, I'm going to go B. I don't think our opinion differs that as much as it might sound.
Which is part of the reason why we do the grading. Because this happens a lot where we're getting really into the details, but in the big picture, we view the card quite similar.
We're not talking about one of us thinks it's an A, one of us thinks it's a C. You just think it's a B plus, and I think it's a B.
Right, which is, I think, it's one of the fundamental reasons why we do the grades. Because if we didn't do the grade and we had that discussion, I think that it would be easy for somebody to come away thinking, Marshall loves the card, Luis hates it. Or Luis isn't that high on it, Marshall really likes it. But the truth is we're actually very similar on it.
Luis has evaluated the card correctly.
Well, no, I don't think anybody would come away with that thought. All right.
Toolcraft Exemplar.
I was going to talk about Tassel Dromedary again, but I guess we can skip it. So.
All right. Well, Toolcraft Exemplar is white for a 1/1 Dwarf Artificer at rare. Mm-hmm. And says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control an artifact, Toolcraft Exemplar gets +2/+1 until end of turn. If you control 3 or more artifacts, it also gains first strike until end of turn. So this is kind of like the equivalent of the red red for a 2/3 if you have an artifact. This is white for a 3/2 because it triggers every turn. And only lasts to end of turn. It can never block as anything but a 1/1. But if you have 3 artifacts, this is attacks as a 3/2 first strike.
So it's only on combat on your turn that it gets this bonus, but it will get it every turn as long as you have an artifact. Yeah.
Okay. Not super into Toolcraft Exemplar.
I'm not either. It's powerful, but
it feels like the kind of card that has moderate upside and high downside because white for a 1/1 is really bad, and you have to be aggressive. Like if you're not attacking your opponent, then this card is quite poor. So I would play this in a white aggro deck that had a bunch of vehicles, but that's just one deck. So
yeah, I agree. I think the Toolcraft Exemplar is pretty narrow as a card, but I would be happy to play it in that deck that you said. So it does deserve some credit, but I think it's like a C.
Yeah, I would give Toolcraft Exemplar a C, and when you play it, it's going to be slightly better than that, and then you're just not going to play it a lot of the other times.
So Angel of Invention, best white rare, Aetherstorm Rock right there with it.
Yeah, that looks right to me.
Fumigate's pretty sweet too. Okay, that means that we are to blue. So let's start off with Aether Squall Ancient. So this is 5 blue for a 6/6 Leviathan at rare. Flying.
Yeah, it's Sky Whales is the theme of the set.
Oh, okay. I'm like, why is a sea monster flying? That doesn't make sense. Okay, Sky Whale, cool. The biggest of the Sky Whales. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get 3 energy. You just get 3 energy. And then you can pay, what is that, 9 energy?
8.
8 energy. Return all other creatures to their owner's hands. Activate this ability only. Oh, there's a huge restriction. You can only do it anytime you could cast a sorcery. Oh my God.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it has all the drawbacks of 7 mana 6/6 flying no text, right? In the sense that the games when this is bad, it's not surviving to your upkeep, and you didn't have 8 energy lying around before you cast it. So you play this, and then your opponent just kills it immediately or bounces it, and you kind of you put a 7 mana spell and didn't get and got answered for presumably less than 7 mana.
Yeah.
But it's also a 6/6 flyer, and gaining 3 energy a turn is no joke. In an energy deck, you could conceivably stack up enough energy. If you can play this and then use the ability right away, then you're probably in great shape. Because you have an empty board with a 6/6 flyer that's going to start recharging, as soon as it's your turn again.
Yeah, one of the big questions about really every set is, where is the cutoff? Like, are we willing to play a 7 mana spell? Because there's a huge difference between the speed of different formats. And Aether Squall Ancient is the type of card that I could see, being well respected and considered a great finisher. I also could see it just going around the table, right? If people are like, no, like 7 mana, you just have too much other stuff to do with your mana, or this format's a little too fast. This is the type of huge, dumb finisher that you could take a pass on and take a good 3-drop over, or a removal spell or something like that, and not really worry about getting a finisher. And frankly, I don't know at this point which one Aether Squall Ancient's going to fall into.
I would lean towards this being worse than premium removal, and
most 7-drops are in general,
and being a fine finisher. And sealed, it goes up a little bit because sealed is slower.
Definitely.
They're not like insanely slower, I don't think.
Definitely. 7 mana is a lot. That's the real focal point here. This card's good, but
without a come into play ability or any sort of protection against anything that would mess with it. I mean, yes, it's good against revoked privileges. That doesn't really answer it, but I'm inclined to give Aether Squall Ancient like C+.
I was going to give it a C+, man.
All right, there we go. Aether Squall Ancient. Next up, we've got Confiscation Coup. This is 3 blue sorcery at rare. Choose target artifact or creature. You get 4 energy. Then you may pay an amount of energy equal to that permanent's converted mana cost to gain control of it. So, this card is incredibly good.
This is mind control-ish?
Straight up, it's mind control on any creature or artifact that costs 4 or less. Because by itself, it already pays for that. So,
oh my God.
3 blue, gain control of target artifact or creature that costs 4 or less would be an A.
That's an A already.
That's already an A. And this is significantly better than that because it is not hard to end up with 1 or 2 energy lying around or 3 energy and then just take anything. Mind controls are just absurd.
And this is better than that.
Yes, they are 2
in
for
some
1s.
ways.
They are 2 for 1s on their face. They give you a significant mana advantage because the card plus whatever the card trades with is worth more than 5 mana in this case. And it's not an enchantment, so it's not vulnerable to enchantment removal. It's just a permanent switch. Bounce still gets around this, but yeah, Confiscation Coup's an A or an A plus if that's.
I'm definitely lifting the moratorium on A plus. All
right, well, Confiscation Coup's an A plus then because there's just no real downside with this card.
No, that's a fantastic card. I can't wait to play it, and I don't want to have people play it against me. Insidious Will, 2 blue. instant, rare, choose one. Counter target spell. You may choose new targets for target spell. And copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Wow, that's a lot going on there.
It is.
That actually feels like it has enough. You were talking earlier about the idea of, flexibility with your cards. And this one actually gives you a pretty significant amount of flexibility. I mean, normally I wouldn't be down for a 4-mana counter spell. And that does seem to be, an important mode. But this one is kind of interesting. Like you can use it to redirect removal spells to your opponent's creatures rather than yours. That's better than countering the spell, right? That's killing one of their cards. That's 2 for 1 in them. That's a huge blowout. Yeah. And then also you can use it to copy your own spells or even your opponent's if it's not a removal spell or whatever. And get the same effect for yourself, which, is going to be very variable in how that goes. And then, of course, you can just counter a spell. This actually, Insidious Will seems like it has enough going on to be quite good.
What I like about Insidious Will is that it's got the kind of mediocre mode of counter target spell that really justifies the whole rest of the card. So, yes, 2 blue counter target spell would be a card we would just give like a D- or whatever and move on. But that's what lets you keep mana up for this card, not knowing what they're going to play. So you pass with your mana up, and then they play a creature or a vehicle or what have you. You're like, all right, counter target spell. If they play a removal spell, you almost just win the game. You just countered their removal spell and killed their best creature that their removal spell could kill. And that upside on the second mode is so high that it's worth the fact that this card is just kind of medium otherwise. Also, this is the perfect card to like attack on your turn with mana up, which is normal. Your opponent's not going to think twice about that. You block and they play a combat check.
Oh, like, no. That's great.
and the last part is going to be the least used mode. But yes, if your opponent plays like a non-targeted spell and you'd rather you both get it than neither of you get it because you can always just counter it, then it's a good way to do that. Or if you have a ton of mana, maybe you can just play like a Harness Lightning and then copy it or something along those lines. So this is a classic example of flexibility plus power, where it's got the very flexible first mode at low power level, the not as flexible but very high power level second mode, and then the third mode is kind of for free. And combine all that and you have a card I like a lot.
Me too. Still, it is not one of those cards, like it certainly doesn't get an A for me. I would give it a B-. I love the high upside. And I love the ability, the fact that it does things that are very difficult to interact with, right? Like this is a type of card that people won't see coming. It's a rare. And also even if they are aware of it, they're just going to be reticent to actually play around it because it's rare. So
I have B- on Insidious Will.
Yeah, that's a sweet card. Metallurgic Summonings is interesting. It's 3 blue for an enchantment at Mythic Rare. It says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create an XX colorless construct artifact creature token where X is that spell's converted mana cost. So just straight up, there's another ability too that I'll read, but it's 5 mana for an enchantment, so it does nothing. So you're just like, okay, 5 mana, go. But whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, if you cast, let's see, a 2 mana removal spell, you get a 2/2. Okay, that's pretty sweet. You also get it at whatever speed you happen to cast that spell at. So you flashed in a 2/2 and maybe killed a creature or whatever. That's pretty good. Now, it also has an activated ability. You can pay 3 blue again and exile it and return all instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand. But you can only activate this ability if you control 6 or more artifacts. And of course, touching on this again, the creatures that it makes are artifacts. So it's kind of like you build out a board and then you can buy it all back. But man, it doesn't do anything the turn you cast it. Just literal nothing.
This is very clearly a builder run, so we're going to start there.
Yeah.
You can't just put this in a normal deck. I think that the decks that you get there when you have like 10 spells, this card's probably going to be pretty great. But most decks are just not going to be there. And it's going to be hard to build a deck to fit those specifications.
Yeah.
My inclination is to give Metallurgic Summonings a pretty low grade and just know that if you somehow took 3 spells in a row and then you took this 4th and just went for it, you could sometimes get there. But that's like kind of like the D build around space to me.
Me too. Give me 2.5 months. Yes. And I will provide you with a screenshot of a Metallurgic Summonings deck that I drafted, but that's not going to happen for a while.
The problem, too, is that a deck with all spells has its own intrinsic problems, and if you don't draw metallurgic summonings, your deck might be very bad.
Right, and yeah, that's a great point. Is that you know, even a deck with a bunch of removal needs a way to get the job done eventually. What about Padim, Consul of Innovation?
He's 3 blue, or she, I guess it's a Vidalcan. I have no idea what they look like. 3 blue for a 1/4 Vidalcan Artificer, legendary at rare.
Okay.
4 mana, 1/4. Artifacts you control have hexproof.
Okay.
At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control the artifact with the highest converted mana cost or tied, draw a card.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So
Padim
rewards going big, basically.
Yeah, it's not true innovation. More just Padim Consul of size. But
yeah.
4 mana for a 1/4 artifacts have hexproof is not a card I would tend to play.
No, that isn't very good.
But it doesn't seem that difficult to draw extra cards. If you have a 3 mana or a 4 mana artifact, a lot of the time you're going to be at least tied for first.
Yeah.
And the cost you're paying isn't that high. You're only paying like 1 more mana than I would be kind of okay with paying for this card. And the upside of drawing a card every turn is obviously very, very high. So,
right, and you can see how the card plays out as well pretty quickly when you say, if you imagine it in play, let's say you have a 4 mana artifact. And your opponent's like, well, I'd like to stop you from drawing an extra card every turn, so I will. Oh, wait, it has hexproof,
yeah.
And so now you kind of locked it down. Yeah, you have to kill Padim, and a 1/4 is difficult to kill. So,
yep.
Okay, I'm not over the moon about Padim, Consul of Innovation, but I like it. I could see this becoming a really annoying card. And while I agree with you that three and a blue for a 1/4 that gives my artifacts hexproof is below the bar on what I'd pay. I think the Padim gives us enough back on the other side to make it a playable card at least.
Yeah, I would give
like
Padim
C+?
I'm thinking B-. I think
Sure.
I think in an artifact heavy deck, it's just going to be one of your good cards.
I think you're probably right. I'll go B- as well on Padim. And if you get to go off, I mean, forget it. Like the game's over. Okay, so that's pretty cool.
Next up, we've got Paradoxical Outcome. This is 3 and a blue instant at rare. Return any number of target non-land, non-token permanents you control to their owner's hands. Draw a card for each card returned to your hand this way.
Wow.
Yeah, so this card...
To your hand. So you only get to draw cards from your things.
Yes. And you can only return things you control. Also.
Right, but is it... does it target non-land, non-token permanent? So...
that clause is only if you gain control of something and then bounce
I see. Okay, that's what it means. Okay, I get it. No, I'm kind of not. This seems terrible. Yeah.
Awful. You can't spend 4 mana and pretend it's a card that's going to save one of your creatures from a removal spell. That's too much. And you can't spend 4 mana and bounce 3 things to draw 3 cards. That's just you're setting your board back.
Isn't that just drawing 6 cards? What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's the opposite of what you want to do when you draw a bunch of cards, is add cards from your board to your hand. So
yeah.
I think Paradoxical Outcome gets an F.
It's an F, yeah.
Unless you open a bunch of Mox Opals or something.
Yeah, sure.
Soul Rings and Mana
Soul
Vaults.
Rings, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's a Storm Enabler. Saheeli's Artistry is 4 blue for a sorcery at rare. And it says choose one or both. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact, and create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types.
This card's unbelievably good.
Oh, is it really good?
It's insane. It's 6 mana. You get to play the best creature and the best artifact, and that costs that's a 2-for-1. It adds up to way more than 6 mana on most boards.
Oh yeah.
And there's always an artifact in play. It is very hard to miss with this card. And even when you miss it and you have to play it as a 6 mana clone, that's still not the end of the world. I think Saheeli's Artistry is very, very good.
Okay. Yeah, this does seem very good to me. Obviously, it'll be variable based on the board state, right? If the best creature is something kind of small and there's a servo token, you're still getting 2 creatures. Is probably not the worst to play Saheeli's Artistry. And that is, I mean, I'm not going to call that the absolute fail case, but that's, a low end, right? You get a 2/1 and a 1/1 or whatever. And then the high end seems completely off the charts.
Yeah, Saheeli's Artistry is, I think, incredible. So,
okay. What do you give it, though? I was going to give it a B. Am I too low?
You are. I'm going to give this an A.
An A?
It's an easy A. This is just a bomb.
Dude, it doesn't do anything. It's completely dependent on the board. How can it be a bomb?
Not really. If you're losing, then this card is going to be good because they have something good out. If you're winning, this card's going to be great. I played against this card in 2 different matches, and it was just beyond absurd every single time.
Okay.
On like a bunch of different boards. You really will always first pick this card when you see it.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to jump on the train. You sound very confident about this.
I'm confident about this one. The fact is, you're getting a 2-for-1 and a mana advantage, and it's hard to be behind on board when you cast this. Basically, for this to not solve your problems, you either have to be so far behind that you need a Wrath, which is whatever, or your opponent just has like multiple giant green creatures and there's 0 artifacts in play. But your deck can already put artifacts into play fairly easily. Like if you have this card, just make sure to pick up a couple artifacts, and most of your opponents are going to have a couple artifacts too. So it's
well, what
really
if they're playing a bunch of small creatures? Does it still hold up there? You know, a bunch of like they're white red with a bunch of little whatevers. Like is it, you know, you're making let's say a glint sleeve artisan and a vehicle or something. That's still good enough, right? Yeah,
it's still good enough because that's on the low end, and the high end of this card is just you copy a 5-drop creature and a 4-drop artifact, and just like you're just not going to lose the game. That's
stupid. That's off the chart stupid. Yeah. Okay. So you've talked me up to B+. You're going A minus. A plus?
I think just a flat A on Saheeli's Artistry.
Okay. Yeah, those. I mean, I like picking at the bad cases. Sorry, go ahead. But yeah, the upper cases are insane.
Well, speaking of upper cases being insane, we've got Torrential Gearhulk next. It's 4 blue for a 5/6 artifact creature construct at Mythic. It's got Flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost and then exile that card.
All right. I like that, to say the least. I like Flash as well as the ability. You know, we've seen First Strike. Okay. Trample seemed fantastic on the Verdurous Gearhulk. What does the Noxious Gearhulk have? Death Touch?
It is Menace.
Menace, right. Which is actually pretty good there,
This
too.
is the best keyword of all of them, I think.
Yeah, Flash is, like, you can actually just get a card out of this. And as a 5/6, it's pretty easy to.
This is just going to be a 3-for-1 a lot of the time. You're gonna play this. You're going to kill their, like, 3/3 attacker. You're going to replay an instant that's getting you a card in some form, whether it's killing their creatures or drawing you a card or putting something into play, whatever. And then you still have a 5/6 in play they have to deal with. Also, unlike other big Flash creatures, like sometimes, let's say your opponent reads you for the Torrential Gearhulk. They're like, I'm not attacking my 4/4, go. You're like, all right, end of turn, play Torrential Gearhulk, replay an instant. You didn't really lose out there.
No, you certainly did attack you for 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that card's fantastic.
This takes a tiny bit of work. If you have a Torrential Gearhulk, try to get like 3 or 4 instants in your deck if you can. Don't worry about it. It's still playable without instants. 6 mana, 5/6 Flash is a playable card. So yes, yeah. Torrential Gearhulk is an A.
Yeah, I am a fan, to say the least. And that's actually the last of our blue cards as well. Blue looks pretty sweet.
Oh, yeah. Blue has a bunch of cards that I think... It has Control Magic and Saheeli's Artistry and, you know, like Confiscation Coup. Both those cards play very similarly in that both of them are like sick 2-for-1 mana advantage cards that bring you back on a losing board. And that's not counting the Gearhulk, which is also awesome. So, yeah, Blue made out pretty well.
I agree. Okay, so that does it for the colors. So let's move on to multicolored, and then we'll have artifact and a few lands as well. So let's see. Our first multicolored rare is called Dipala Pilot Exemplar, and she is a 1 red-white 3/3 legendary creature dwarf pilot, and she's a dwarf lord. So other dwarves you control get +1/+1. And each vehicle you control gets +1/+1 as long as it's a creature. So whenever you crew it, it gets a bonus as well. And whenever Dipala Pilot Exemplar becomes tapped, you may pay X. If you do, reveal the top X cards of your library, put all dwarf and vehicle cards from among them in your hand, and then the rest on the bottom in a random order. That's right, all of them. It's not choose one. It's any dwarfs and or vehicles you get in your hand as well.
No, you get to choose them, but you just have to choose all of them.
Yes. So there's a lot going on here. Look, for starters, we have a 3/3 for 3, which is already above the vanilla test and good. The dwarves you control get +1/+1 is, I'm not sure like how great that is. There's definitely a significant number of dwarves, but I don't know if like that's the shining light here. The vehicles getting bigger. Well, that's pretty straightforward. They're already big. They get a little bit bigger, which is, I'm sure you'll take it. And then whenever she attacks or becomes tapped for any reason, you can just start chaining through your deck and find a bunch of extra dwarves and vehicles and such. How do you see this thing for limited? Like, how big is the dwarves thing, for example?
I I think DePaul is quite good. Even if you come up short on the number of dwarves, you're still going to end up in a spot where you'll have vehicles. If you somehow have no dwarves and no vehicles and you're red-white, I don't really know what happened, because even if you're not trying to, you should end up with like 3 to 5 total of those cards.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you have DePaula, she's giving you a significant advantage if you get those cards, because first of all, she draws them, by paying X. Second of all, she's giving you bonuses on both sides. So I think DePaul is quite good. She's like a build around that doesn't really cost you much to build around her. So that leads me to want to just give her a B+.
I think B+ is great for DePaula. And the times when you do get to build around her, she's going to be in an A. She's just going to be one of the best.
The one danger point here is don't spend a ton of mana on the X if you have other things to play. This is the kind of ability I see as like a bonus that when you run out of good cards, you just start using it, not a play her turn 3, turn 4, pay 4 for her. So
agreed, especially in the decks that she goes into. So we've got our first multicolored planeswalker here of the set, Dovin Baan, which is 2 white-blue for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. And you can +1 Dovin. It says, until your next turn, up to 1 target creature gets -3/-0, and its activated abilities can't be activated. That's really good. We've seen that type of effect on Flip Jace as well as Liliana, where it's neutralizing a threat but keeping it on the battlefield, and that has been great. And this one does better than either of those in some scenarios. -1, you gain 2 life and draw a card. And -7, so the ultimate, which by the way is very far off. Dovin comes down at 3 loyalty and only +1. So
I predict I will never see a Dovin ultimate.
Yeah, but what it does, in case you do happen to get there, is you get an emblem with your opponents can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untap steps. It's not even, whatever. All right,
you give your opponent a static orb, which is actually one of the masterpieces, funnily enough.
There you go. So 3 loyalty on a 4 mana planeswalker is not that much, but does have the ability to protect itself, so that's a good thing, and can draw cards, which is something that you said you liked as well, though it is the minus ability here.
Yeah, this is a very tame version of Chandra. Dovin's fine. He is good enough that I would be happy first picking Dovin and building a blue-white deck,
I think so, too.
But it's not a game-ending bomb. This strikes me as one of those planeswalkers that, like, if you play this and +1 it, so your opponent can't kill it, next turn it's not like, I get to untap -1 it and I'm winning. Your opponent might be able to kill it then, because now you've got a 3 loyalty planeswalker and you didn't protect it at all. So my guess is that Dovin is good, but not insane, which kind of leads me to like B+ level.
Yeah, I think it's probably around that too. I mean, it might be an A- just because planeswalkers do such weird things to limited games, but Dovin Baan is fantastic. I mean, as far as power level goes, but
I guess the split card of draw an extra card every turn if the board is stable, or negate a creature every turn if it's not, is pretty good.
Yeah, it's very good. I'll go A- on Dovin Baan.
I still like B+, but I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, like, when you play a Planeswalker Unlimited, people just freak out and start sending their creatures into yours, and, like, oftentimes...
It does induce mistakes.
Yes, it does. What about Kambal, Console of Allocation?
1 white-black for a 2/3 legendary human advisor at rare.
Okay.
Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life.
A non-creature spell. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, this is a very solid card.
Yeah.
You're going to get like a couple drains per game, I would say. And if he stays out forever, then that number increases. 3 mana, 2/3 just sits there being annoying. This seems like a very aggravating card to play against. And
Drain 2 is a lot as well. That is a big effect. So,
I mean, 3 mana, 2/3 drain your opponent for 4 would be a very solid card. That would already, I think, be a B for me.
Yeah, I agree.
And this, I think, has upside above that. I think I'd rather have this text box than that text box.
I think so too, because it counts all non-creature spells, right? That includes
artifacts,
vehicles. Enchantments and stuff. So, yeah, I think Kambal's good. I'm not in love, but I do think it's a B, or could it be a B+? It's really annoying.
It actually does feel like a B still, even though that other text box I said was a B. But I don't think you're going to be Kambaling out of control all that often, but like against some decks, they can never beat it. Like you play against like a blue-black control deck that has tons of artifacts and enchantments and is trying to set up the underhanded dealing and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
You play this, they're like, well, I guess I'm dead. So
they have to have an answer.
I still like B on Kambal.
I do too. Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter, is a 2 green blue 2/3 legendary creature elf druid at Mythic Rare. And it says, whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card with converted mana cost less than that spell's, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you don't cast the revealed card, put it into your hand.
Yeah, so
it's a weird card, right?
I misread this card on my written set reviews, which tends to happen, especially since I don't have like another person there to correct me, which generally happens to me here. But anyway,
jeez, you went from the humbles to the daggers very seamlessly there.
But the long and the short of it is that Rashmi is an incredibly good card. She's very close to, when you cast a spell, draw a card. Sometimes that card is free.
Yes. How is she not that?
I mean, that is what she is, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Your opponent gets to see it, though.
That's true. So C- because your opponent gets to see how they're losing.
I think Rashmi actually just gets an A- from me.
I think so, too. The fact that you can play Rashmi, and yes, she's a 2/3 for 4. She's not great as far as stats go. But the fact that if your opponent's staring you down and you see that you have a Rashmi, that once you play another spell, the chain starts rolling, they must kill Rashmi. And if they are not actively killing you or don't have an answer for Rashmi, the game's just going to get out of reach really quickly. And that is just very, very powerful. And even then, in your worst case, it is still a 2/3 for 4 mana. You can block. That is, we look at cards like this that are like enchantments or something, and you get the upside of having it that your opponent can't really kill it, but the downside of if you're getting ran over, you can't block. And Rashmi can block. You can. I mean, you're going to want to do that carefully, but hey, when you're behind and you're getting ran over by a bunch of servos and small creatures, blocking a 2/2 with your Rashmi is very real. And on top of it, again, if the board is stable, you're just going to take over if you get to untap with Rashmi. And I think that's all very, very good.
Yeah, Rashmi is a great card. A little bit slow, but that's really the only quibble. And you should probably just take her every time you see her.
This next card is Saheeli Rai. And I think I'm a little less excited about this card, actually. It's 1 blue-red for a Planeswalker, Saheeli, at 3 loyalty. Now, that part, I'm like, wow, that's a 3 mana, 3 loyalty Planeswalker. That is already has my attention. But the abilities are a little bit questionable. So, +1. Scry 1, Saheeli Rai deals 1 damage to each opponent. So a pretty minimal effect all told, right? A Scry 1's something, and doing 1 damage to your opponent something, but it's not great. No. But that's the plus ability. We don't expect that to be, game winning. The -2 is create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. That token gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So you get to copy something temporarily at the cost of -2 loyalty, putting Saheeli Rai down to 1 right away if that's what you do first. Then again, we've got an ultimate that is big at -7 on a Planeswalker that needs to go from 3 to 7 with no way to protect herself. So this is one of those ones that's going to happen very infrequently. But when it does, search your library for up to 3 artifact cards with different names and to put them onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library.
I'm not a huge Saheeli Rai fan.
I'm not either.
She doesn't protect herself because the copy you make dies at the end of your turn. Her Scry 1 is not quite draw a card. Dealing 1 damage to each opponent is fine, but that's not really what you want out of a Planeswalker most of the time.
It's very minimal, yeah.
So it's the kind of thing where she doesn't help you stabilize the board. Copying a Fabricate creature gives you some servos that stick around, so she does protect herself in that sense. But mostly she doesn't help you stabilize the board, and she doesn't draw you cards that effectively. Despite her costing 3, I'm suspicious of Saheeli being an early pick. I do think that you would play her in most blue-red decks that have.
I think so too. Just the virtue of the fact that she's a Planeswalker and does have a lot of options matters. Again, things do pop up. Installed boards, you just start plussing Saheeli Rai and getting a lot of advantage off of the Scry, and then maybe even working your way up to an ultimate if it even makes sense for your deck. Or, like you said, you find something good to copy, like, a card that leaves behind value, basically like a Fabricate card or whatever. I still think Saheeli Rai is probably like a B- type card. She does enough and draws enough attention that she's going to have a powerful effect. But given that she's a Planeswalker and many Planeswalkers are just A's, I don't think she's in that camp. She may be a C+ even, but somewhere in that range.
I would give Saheeli Rai a C. I think that
Just a straight C.
Yeah, there are some decks where she's going to overperform a little bit if you can draft a bunch of creatures and artifacts that have good enters the battlefield abilities. But stick her on the average blue-red deck. I think she's just going to perform like one of your average cards.
Yeah, see, I think that's wrong. The reason I think it's wrong is that I think you're grading her against other planeswalkers. But if you take her out of that realm and say, okay, but she is a planeswalker, which has inherently great things, meaning that you have two different abilities, which is important, and also the effect that she has on the game. I think that she does creep up into the B range for me.
Yeah, I just don't think that most blue-red decks are going to have so many things because red doesn't have.
Yeah, but she's not that powerful.
Red doesn't have fabricate creatures that you really want to copy. And so you're really leaning on like the few blue cards that do that. Like what cards are you playing with her that make her this awesome? And I think that if you can experimental aviator with her, that's great. You can make two Thopters, but I just think a lot of times if you can't protect her, she's just not going to be good. And when you can protect her, she's going to have like a moderate effect on the game. There's just so many times when you just can't cast Saheeli.
Okay. No, that's true. That is very true. She does not interact with your opponent's cards.
If she was black-white, for example, the exact same cost but black-white, I would like her more. I think there's just more support. Because you just have more chance to get fabricate,
yeah. And to hold myself accountable as well, I'm always talking about how much I like cards that are good when you're behind, and how I don't put those on a pedestal. And Saheeli Rai is not good when you're behind.
Oh no,
very bad. Okay, that's it for the multicolored cards. It's going to bring us to Artifact, of which there's probably quite a few, right? Rares, I'm assuming.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, let's get into them here. Here's the one that I opened at the pre-release. Aether Flux Reservoir. I left that one in its shiny plastic sleeve. It's 4 mana for an artifact at rare. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn.
All your spells have Storm, gain X life.
Gain X life, yeah. So you gain 1 life for each spell. So the first one you gain 1, and then the next one you gain 2, and then the next one you gain 3, like that.
Yep.
Okay, and then you can pay 50 life. I'm not kidding. It's literally just, as the activated ability, pay 50 life, and it deals 50 damage to target creature or player. I love that you can hit a creature with it.
Kaboom. This card seems fun, but you really should not build your deck around this. This just doesn't work. Like,
it doesn't work.
You have to play like 5 spells in the same turn to really start getting to the point where you're going to approach 50. Playing 2 spells a turn and gaining 3 a turn is just
It's just an F, man.
I'm not in for Aether Flux Reservoir. I might try it at some point, but yeah, I'm not gonna recommend that you do so.
Agreed. Aetherworks Marvel. What does this one do?
It's a 4 colorless artifact. It's a legendary artifact at Mythic. Whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get 1 energy.
So any permanent, you get an energy. Okay.
Yep. Tap, pay 6 energy. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest in the bottom of your library. So
look at the top 6, and you get 1 of them for free.
Yeah. So this generates an okay amount of energy. If you have a lot of servos, every time one dies, you get an energy. That's reasonable. It gives you a good outlet because looking at your top 6 and playing the best card among them for free is a pretty big thing. I think Aetherworks Marvel is solid in an energy deck. I don't think that you're just going to slot this into a random deck and be happy with it. But this feels like, a slightly above average build around.
God, really? Man, I'm looking at it and just hating it.
I don't know. I just see like playing this and a bunch of Fabricate cards and just every couple turns cranking out the best of the cards left in your deck.
I hate it. I'm just off it.
All right.
Aetherworks Marvel, I think it's just bad. Here's my contention. I think that in an energy decks give you places to spend energy. And I don't think that this is a particularly great place to put 6 energy. Like, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You get 1 of them. I mean, maybe you have you get
1 of them and a bunch of mana.
And a bunch of mana?
Because you get to play it for free.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You get to tap this thing and play it for free. I don't know.
At instant speed. I think the Aetherworks Marvel will fit into like an energy deck that has other ways to generate energy and a lot of ways to generate tokens. That's still pretty niche, though. It's not like it's not gonna pop up all that often. But as far as build arounds go, I'd probably give it like a C+.
All right, I'm gonna give it a build around D.
All right.
I hate it. Animation Module. What does this one do? It's only 1 mana.
It's a 1 mana artifact at rare. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a permanent you control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 servo. 3 tap, choose a counter on target permanent or player. So I guess you can give people infect counters. Give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. Oh, can that make energy as well? I guess.
Yes. Those are energies are counters. Okay.
Yeah.
So whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are placed on permanents you control, you may pay 1 and then get servos.
So whenever you play a Fabricate card,
yes,
you can pay 1. You can choose to get the +1/+1 counters, and then you can pay 1 to make a servo. You can also then, if you have anything with a +1/+1 counter, pay 3 and tap this, put another counter on that, and then pay 1 and get another servo.
I see.
For 1 mana, this seems okay.
That is weird. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So the thing is, the animation module can't get anything started on its own, right?
No, by itself. Like you could draw this card and have it never do anything.
And the thing that gets it kickstarted is putting +1/+1 counters on a permanent you control. But even if you end up with counters, let's say you draw this after that, you can still activate the ability and start that going as well.
Right. I think for 1 mana, I buy this because you can play this for 1, and then at some point make a servo or 2 servos, off of your other cards, and then start paying 3 and then 1, so 4 to get a +1/+1 counter and a servo over and over again. That sounds like it justifies itself in a deck that's set up to take advantage of it. I
see. Okay, but in order to activate the ability and get a servo for 4 mana total, it does have to be specifically +1/+1 counters that you're.
Yeah. There's not a ton of other counters rolling around. And I guess you can pay 3 and tap and give yourself an energy if you have energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like animation module. It's a build around for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a build around.
This gets to like the B- level build around.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I could see this thing taking over, but it's pretty narrow. But I think if you built around it, you could build around it pretty easily as long as you had the right deck for it. And if you don't, you just keep it in your sideboard. Weird card. Bomat Courier.
1 colorless
by the
mana.
way, this is going to be our Ben Stark card. Bomat Courier.
Yes. 1 colorless mana for a 1/1 artifact creature at rare, a construct. Mm-hmm. It has haste. Whenever it attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. You can't look at it. And so actually having played with this card already, it is difficult to remember that you can't look at it because the natural tendency when you exile a card is to look at it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of annoying. You can pay 1 red mana and discard your hand. You sacrifice Bomat Courier. Put all cards exiled with Bomat Courier into their owner's hands.
Oh, interesting.
So every time this attacks, it pseudo draws a card because it puts a card into exile, and then you can sack this and discard your hand to draw all those cards.
Right. So it kind of draws a card for later.
Yeah.
But this thing also has to be around at the time when you want to use it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like if you have 4 cards in your hand and they're all decent and you've got 2 cards exiled by the Bomat Courier, you don't want to use it. But then if it dies before you're ready to use it, let's say you've spent all the other cards in your hand, you've just got 1 left at some land, or maybe you're just hellbent, then you want to use the Bomat Courier to draw yourself, well, probably 3 cards, right? Because you can attack with it, exile a card, and just sack it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this card's quite bad, though, because it's a 1/1 for 1. Even though it has haste, sure, if you play it turn 1, maybe you get 2 free hits in, but a lot of the games you're going to draw this, and you're just not going to have an attack, and you're playing a 1/1 for 1 that can, with the cost of discarding your hand, can draw you 1 card.
Ugh. And you don't even know what it is? Oh, jeez.
Yeah, this just does not seem like it gets there in Limited at all.
No,
so
it really doesn't.
I'm going to give Bomat Courier an F.
Yeah, poor Bomat Courier. He tried so hard. Cultivator's Caravan. This is our first rare vehicle, right? So 3 mana for a 5/5 vehicle that taps to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Remember, these things are just artifacts when they're sitting on the battlefield. Its crew cost is 3.
Yeah, I really like Cultivator's Caravan.
That's sweet.
It's a 3 mana 5 color mana rock that if you tap 3 power worth of creatures becomes a 5/5. So it's kind of like a split card.
I love that. That's cool.
Cultivator's Caravan is awesome. I think Cultivator's Caravan is actually an A-.
Do you think it's an A-? It hits that hard. Like enabling splashes ramping up, and then the ability, like the fact that it does, the big knock on vehicles is that they sit there in the junkyard until you crew them. This one doesn't.
Yeah, this is a land /5/5 split card.
That is great. I really like it. I would give it a B+, but Cultivator's Caravan, that is cool. That is a neat use of design space. I like that a lot. Let's take a look at Deadlock Trap, which is 3 mana for an artifact at rare. It enters the battlefield tapped. When Deadlock Trap enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy, and you can tap it and pay an energy to tap target creature or planeswalker, and its activated abilities can't be activated this turn. So we have a tapper, but it does take energy. It gives you 2 taps, and you can't use it the turn that you play it because it ETB's tapped.
I found this card to be decent in a very well stocked energy deck, which is what with the sealed deck I had. But it's really, really bad outside of an energy deck because by itself.
What about an aggro deck?
Taking 1 turn to come online and then getting 2 taps out of it, that's like a bad Tumble Magnet, and I didn't think Tumble Magnet was that good.
I kind of like Tumble Magnet, but I agree that this is so not even worse, that. Though. It's way worse, yeah.
So I think Deadlock Trap is a serviceable card in a heavy energy deck and largely unplayable outside of that, which makes me want to just give it a C.
Yeah, it's like a build-around-ish C, or at least a narrow C.
It's like a supplemental card for an energy deck is more how I would look at it.
All right. What about Dynavolt Tower?
So I did actually get a chance to play with this one as well. I went deep on the energy cards.
Okay.
It's 3 colorless mana for a rare artifact. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get 2 energy. Tap, pay 5 energy. Dynavolt Tower deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So, in a spell-heavy deck, this is a pretty sweet little build-around. It also combines well with other energy cards. It's
a lightning bolt factory?
It's a little awkward. 5 and 2 means you have to, by itself, cast 3 spells to get it going. So, I don't think the story is fully complete in just this in a spell deck. I think you want other ways to generate energy as well, or spells that specifically also generate energy, because otherwise it's just too slow. Clearly a build-around, not on the high end of the build-arounds, even though it was pretty sweet. I think it's like a C build-around.
I mean, how good is it if you get to, let's say you have 3 energy, you play it, you get the extra 2 energy, and you get to just like kill one thing with it. Are you already fine with that? Or does it need to do more before you're happy?
You really need to activate it like twice to feel like you got value, I think.
Okay.
And the fact that most energy generators generate 2 energy means it's gonna like the thriving creatures and whatnot. It's gonna take a little bit more work than that. So it's enough work that I'm not in love with the card.
Okay. So you said build around, but what kind of grade? C?
Like a C.
Yeah. Okay. Electrostatic Pummeler is 3 mana for a 1/1. Well, not really pummeling quite yet. It's rare. It's an artifact creature construct. It says when Electrostatic Pummeler enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy counters, and you can pay 3 energy counters to give the Pummeler +X until end of turn, where X is its power.
So by itself, it's a 3 mana 1/1 that can once jump to a 2/2.
What the? So this is supposed to be. What is this supposed to be?
Well, you're supposed to combine it with other energy cards, because if you get to 9 energy, you can make it 2/2/4/4/8/8.
Okay.
Or combine with pump spells, because you cast your Built to Smash on this, make it a 4/4 Trampler, and then double it to an 8/8.
Okay.
I don't like either of those scenarios.
I'm not like any of these.
I think Electrostatic Pummeler just gets a D, and if you have like super heavy pump spells or energy decks, maybe you play it, but most decks just not play this.
I'm going to give it an F.
All right.
Yeah, the thing that kills me on it is that it is a 3 mana 1/1. Like it just does stone nothing unless you're comboing off. I mean, I need something. I make it a 2/3 or a 1/3 or whatever. Like if the power needs to be 1, but I just need something out of this card. And also that makes it incredibly fragile. Like the time when you're like, okay, pump spell, they're like do 2 damage to it. You're like, well, all right, I can't even save it with my energy I have here. So yeah, I'm just going to give Electrostatic Pummeler an F. I'm definitely not a fan of that one. Fleetwheel Cruiser. This one's 4. Yeah, go ahead, read it.
4 colorless mana for a vehicle. It's a rare. It's a 5/3 trample haste with crew 2. So and when it enters the battlefield, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So you get to play this and attack for 5 immediately. Nothing else has to happen.
First crew's free for this one.
Yes, and after that, it is Crew 2, which is not that heavy for a 5/3 Trampler. I think Fleetwheel Cruiser is quite good. It gets around the vehicle drawback by just attacking immediately for 5, even if you have no other creatures. So you can go you play a creature on turn 2 or 3 and they kill it, then you go turn 4, attack you for 5. Turn 5, play a creature, crew this, attack you for 5. And the stats are pretty decent. This is a good aggressive card, but I think it's even playable in just almost any deck.
I do too.
It's just a good card.
I just think it's a really good card. I think it's a B.
Yeah, I could give Fleet Wheel Cruiser a B as well.
Gear per Orrery is 4 mana for an artifact at rare. It says each player may pay an additional land on each of his or her turns. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards. So you can just dump your hand of lands and hopefully just dump your entire hand and then start drawing a bunch of cards. Unfortunately, this does count for both players.
I don't really see how you're getting an edge on this card. Like, yes, maybe you're playing a deck with a lot of really cheap cards, so you're triggering it more than your opponent, but paying 4 mana for a symmetrical effect that is kind of hard to pull off, doesn't affect the board. I just can't get behind Gear per Orrery. I'm going to have to give this card an F.
Yeah, I think so too. Sad face because it's kind of cool, but you mentioned it. It's symmetrical, but you have to be the one to pay the card and the mana to get it going. That makes it not symmetrical anymore. Key to the City. 2 mana for an artifact at rare. You can tap it and discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. Whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, draw a card.
I like Key to the City. It's a nice little looting engine that also like gets one of your creatures through for damage. I think that you're going to want the unblockable ability before this card really starts to shine. But when you do, this is a pretty good way to get that ability. Normally, you wouldn't want to pay for that, but this lets you turn your worst card into a new card and does that every turn at not huge cost. 2 to cast and then 2 to use is not absurd. And you also don't have to pay the 2 if you just want the unblockable ability.
Yeah, and how I find it interesting that they offloaded the cost in a really cool way here. And it's not cool for us as the user of Key to the City, but it's an interesting design element in that they make it you pay for this when it untaps. So that's the turn when you're getting your extra card, and that's the turn when you'd want the mana to cast whatever that extra card is, but you have to tie it up at that time. Kind of interesting.
Yes, it probably makes it worse than if it was just 2 tap, discard a card, make a creature unblockable, draw a card. But
right, when it untaps, you draw a card.
I guess if you can tap this in some way other than using it, then you can get value. But
yeah, that's true. That
seems kind of difficult. I have this card at like C+. I think that the decks that wanted it will be quite good. It'll be kind of medium otherwise.
Yeah, C+ seems fine. I like powering through vehicles can just end the game. And then, like you said, using a delayed loot, even if it does come at a cost, can be powerful too. It also can break up a board stall really well. Metalwork Colossus is next. What is this thing? This is like the biggest accomplished automaton ever.
Yeah, it's 11 mana for a 10/10 construct at rare. Metalwork Colossus costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of non-creature artifacts you control. So that mostly means vehicles, but also like puzzle knots and stuff like that. Just random
it adds up all of their converted mana. It's not like Affinity where it reduces it by 1.
No, it's not counting the total. It's counting the your Fleet Wheel Dragster makes it cost 4 less.
Okay. Wow. That's insane.
It also has the ability, sacrifice 2 artifacts, return Metalwork Colossus from your graveyard to your hand. Well, this is, I think, very clearly a build around. You can't pay 11 for this. If you can pay 6 for this, you feel pretty good. If you can pay 7 for this, you feel okay. But a 7 mana dork is, 7 mana 10/10 is not that different than 7 mana 7/7 in terms of the games it wins versus the games it loses.
Right.
So
6 does feel insane to me, though.
Yes, if you can get this to 6, and that doesn't, it takes vehicles, and the problem is you kind of don't want vehicles if you're trying to enable an 11 drop, or now 6 or 7 drop giant creature. Vehicles aren't really where you want to be, but I guess that's what you're supposed to do. You can try to play a bunch of puzzle knots, but then you're spending a bunch of mana and not really affecting the board either. I don't know.
I see potential here, man. But
there's something here, but yeah, I don't know how you're supposed to get to that something really.
Right. Like, I don't like the board state where my board is a 10/10 and a bunch of artifacts that don't do anything. Like, I want this to be in a control deck, right? Or in a deck that is comfortable with saving up some resources on board and then eventually casting Metalwork Colossus. And it feels like the cards that we're going to use to make it cost less aren't there. Like, they don't do it what we want to do. God, I don't know, man. I actually just don't. I have to play with this card. I can't figure out how often. Like, You can't pay 11. It's just off the table. So you absolutely have to lay out the cards that are going to affect the mana cost on this and see what you've got. But man, if you have one 4-mana vehicle,
right,
you're already down to 7, which we both said, okay, sure, like you don't feel like you're breaking the game, but you're doing something.
Turn 5, Aradara Express. Turn 6, play Colossus, crew the Express, attack for 9. Or 8 rather. Yeah, like that's
see, like that's real. Like that, and look, one thing that I've done fairly consistently is underrate power and toughness. Like I agree that what you said, like the difference between this and a 6/6 or a 7/7,
two draw a card than a 10/10.
Yeah, often, but for some reason, but the thing is, the 10/10 is absolutely tough to deal with and affects the board in a huge way. Like, yes, they can just throw servos under it for a turn or two, but they have to. They have to. Like, you make them react to you, and there's nothing on the ground that's going to attack through this as well. It just gobbles up gear hulks and whatever. So I'm actually slightly optimistic on it. I think it might be worth going for, because the times when you do get to make any type of reasonable, maybe you just draw 2 vehicles and just cast this thing for like 3 or 4 mana or whatever. It's a 10/10. It's huge.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a B. I have no clue. It's maybe just a build around. I don't really know how to do it, but I see a lot of power here, and I'm optimistic about Metalwork Colossus.
Just to be clear, you're giving it a build around B. I'm going to go ahead and give Metalwork Colossus a C+, but I do enjoy your optimism.
Okay. Yeah. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. Multiform Wonder is next. It's 5 mana for a 3/3 artifact creature construct at rare. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy counters. You can pay an energy to have it gain your choice of flying, vigilance, or lifelink until end of turn. And you can pay an energy to have it get +2, -2, or -2, +2 until end of turn.
This card is wonderful.
That is fantastic.
Since a lot of the time, this is just going to like smash over for 3 in the air or 5 in the air, depending on what the game state looks like. And then the turn you give it +2, -2, you're often going to want to also give it lifelink. It plays very nicely with other energy cards. Even by itself, it still, I think, does enough to justify itself as a 5-drop, because it gets just this like one big hit in and then still sits around as a 3/3.
And any deck can play this?
Oh, any deck can play it and will play it. So Multiform Wonder is quite solid. It's not a bomb, but quite solid.
It's still like, I actually think this might creep up into the like A- range for me. Goes into any deck. You just throw it in.
To get it to A-, I think you want to generate energy other ways. Because
I see.
If it consistently hit for 5 lifelink in the air, yes, this card's pretty easily an A. If it can do that once and then become a 3/3, that is feeling a little more B+y to me. But yeah, maybe it's just an A- overall, because it's not hard to just pick up a thriving creature or 2 and kind of get there on the Multiform Wonder.
Yeah, I just love the fact that it's colorless too. It's just like, oh, sweet, Multiform Wonder, done. I'm going to give it an A-. The card just looks great to me. Also love the fact that it's good on defense and offense.
Yeah, it really does. Serve as a 1/5 if that's what you need. So
okay, Panharmonicon.
Yeah, this is a 4 mana for an artifact at rare. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Okay,
so triggered abilities happen twice. But yes, only if it's from your stuff entering the battlefield, your artifacts and creatures.
So we can clearly slot this into build around.
Oh, no, it's any artifact. Okay, I see. It can be your opponents, though. That usually isn't the case.
Yeah, sorry. Your abilities have to trigger. So sometimes they'll play a thing that makes one of your things trigger, but that's not going to happen very often.
Right.
Mostly it's going to be you playing a card with that enter the battlefield ability and then just getting a second copy of that.
I'm sure there's some dreamer out there that has a plan for Panharmonicon, but I am not that person.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to come together very much. Like, how often is this going to pan out versus you pay 4 mana and get one trigger that's not worth 4 mana the whole game?
Yeah, no way. I'm not playing Panharmonicon. No way.
I'll give it a build around D and say that sometimes you're going to get there maybe like once or twice in the entire format.
Again, I'll see you in a couple months on Panharmonicon. Right. I'll go build around D as well. Scrap Heap Scrounger. What does this guy do?
2 mana for a 3/2 artifact creature construct at rare. Scrap Heap Scrounger can't block. And you can pay one and a black and exile another creature card from your graveyard. Return Scrap Heap Scrounger from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is the, Bloodghast Gravecrawler type card. It's a colorless card, but it still has a black activated, and then it can't block like these cards tend to not be able to do.
I don't normally like cards like this, but is this one different?
Yeah, this one's good enough in an aggressive deck. Basically, if you think you're going to be attacking enough of the time that the can't block isn't a huge drawback, Scrap Heap Scrounger is great. Because it's a 2-mana 3/2 that's very hard to kill. And that's just good value. If you play this on turn 2, they're probably going to have to trade for it, and then 3 or 4 turns later when something else dies, this just comes back into play. You drew a card. So I like it in aggressive decks. I think it's going to be one of your better cards in an aggressive deck, and it's just unplayable in mid-range or control.
Yeah. Gosh, but man, how aggressive of a deck, right? Like, this is still limited. Most decks are mid-range, that slant towards aggressive or slant towards control rather than being a fully dedicated aggro deck. How far along on that spectrum do you think you need to be before Scrap Heap Scrounger is a card that you want to put in your deck?
You'd have to be pretty aggressive.
Okay.
Which I think is the minority of the times when you draft a black deck that you'll be like, well, not by a whole lot though. Like, I would say like slightly less than half the time you draft a black deck, you'll want this in your deck. Maybe even close to half. So that makes me think.
Half the time, really? I was thinking you'd play this like 15% of the time.
I think it's going to be way more higher. I don't think you have to be insanely aggressive to want this because, like, a black deck that is mid-range but has a low curve would just play this card because the upside is pretty high.
Dude, the downside's real though, man.
The downside is very real. I will give you that.
I mean, you're right. The 3/2 for 2 mana is legit. There's no doubt about that.
That just hits hard enough that, like, you don't need a ton of support before your opponent's like, all right, fine, I eventually have to block this card.
Right. And then you can start.
You can also sacrifice this for value and keep getting it back.
Okay. I like that better. So what grade are you going to give it?
I like it at like C+, but again, this is one of those weird cards. It's not a build around, but the decks that want it think it's a B and the decks that don't think it's an F. So
right.
I like it as C+ to kind of represent where I would take it. Like, I would take it below removal, but above like random creatures.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a D, but in the same vein that you are. I think I'm going to take it less often. I think that I would compress that range of decks that really want Scrap Heap Scrounger down a bit further. I could still see them, but I really want to be an aggressive deck, like, very aggressive deck rather than anywhere in between. I think it's pretty bad in those other decks. Ooh. That's a big ship.
This one's going to be easy.
Yeah. So Sky Sovereign Console Flagship is 5 mana for a Mythic Rare Legendary Artifact vehicle. It's a 6/5 flying. It's got crew 3, very reasonable. And it says whenever Sky Sovereign enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Is this card real? Like, this is stupid.
Yeah, this card is absurd. It's a 5 mana, like a 5 mana spell that deals 3 to an opposing creature is a card you'd be like begrudgingly play in your deck.
Yes.
But that's like a quarter of what this card does at most.
Yeah.
It provides you a 6/5 flyer if you can crew it, and it just keeps lightning bolting. It can play this, kill their 3/3, next turn crew it, attack, kill a 2/2.
Yeah, this is stupid. This card's an A.
Oh yeah, Sky Sovereign's an easy A. I had to play against this card in the first match of this format I played. It did not go well for me.
I don't imagine that it did. Yeah, that's insane. Also, the other thing that, really stands out on cards like this is the whole vehicle can't be hit by sorcery speed removal thing. And this thing has 5 toughness when it attacks. What instant? There's not that many. There's a black one and a few others, but the red burn spells aren't killing this. And
well, I actually was able to cast Malfunction on this.
Oh, okay.
And that did lock it down. My opponent then casts Sahili's Artistry, copying Sky Sovereign and their Marionette Master. So, I didn't really win that
game. Did they sacrifice the right one?
They did.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but yes, this card is very difficult to kill, and because it does something when you play it, it doesn't give you the whole drawback of you've got nothing to crew, this does nothing. This still just kills one of their creatures, not their biggest creature, but it kills one of their creatures, and then sits there, and your opponent the rest of the game has to respect, like, what if they just play a 3/3 and crew it and attack?
Yeah. That's the thing about this that seems to separate it out, is that it really entices you to crew and attack. You get value from it, where some of the non-mythic rare vehicles don't. They say, okay, you can crew it and attack, but you're leaving yourself vulnerable or whatever. So yeah, anyway, A for Sky Sovereign console flagship. Oh man, this next one looks really good too. Smuggler's Copter. Have you seen this one yet, Luis?
Oh yeah, I have seen this in action in Constructed, actually.
Okay, interesting.
Starting the playtest standard, and this is 2 mana for a 3/3 artifact vehicle at rare. It's got flying. Whenever Smuggler's Copter attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And it has crew 1.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, this is on the other end of the spectrum from Sky Sovereign as to like how it operates, because this is cheap and very easy to crew, but it's very similar in power level because this card is absurd.
That's completely insane. What are they thinking making this card?
You don't have to connect to loot with this. So if it attacks or blocks, you get to loot. So it's a 2 mana 3/3 flyer that's very, very easy to crew. Any creature can crew it. And then every time it gets into combat, you get to improve the average quality of your hand.
Unbelievable.
So,
why does it have 3 toughness? That makes me nervous. Like I want some way to kill this thing.
It's so it beats everything in combat is the thing.
It certainly does.
Yeah, so Smuggler's Copter, it's slightly worse than Sky Sovereign flagship. I mean, this is the kind of card that, like, on turn 7, this isn't going to be, like, your best card or anything like that. But the fact that every game where this is in your opening hand, you feel like you got away with something, does mean, a lot. So I'm going to give Smuggler's Copter an A-, but I could be talked up to an A potentially.
I'm going to give it an A.
Right.
The crew cost is low enough. It has enough toughness that it dodges a lot of the instant speed removal, and it's 2 mana.
Yeah,
this is your 2-drop. Like what?
Yeah, 2 mana cards are quite valuable.
Yeah, I love Smuggler's Copter. I give it an A. Card's unreal. Okay, and
right. I'm willing to give Smuggler's Copter an A if we then give the console flagship an A+.
I'm in. Right. You do not have to convince me of that.
Talked you into it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it for the artifacts. It leaves us with a few lands, and then we'll be all done here. Our first land is part of a cycle, so we've got 5 of them. It's called Blooming Marsh. Okay. It's a land, and it says it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, and this one taps for green or black. So what we have here are I think that people call them fast lands. So the enemy fast lands is what we've got.
Yeah, so
we've got all 5 of them.
Yeah. Black, green, black, white, red, white, and red, blue.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all going to get the same grade because there's no color combination that's drastically different here.
Yeah.
They're all just like C's in the sense that you'll always play them, but you shouldn't really take them over anything. I don't know. I don't tend to prioritize multi-lands all that high, but maybe a C+ is a better representation because if you have a lot of playables, you'd rather have this than an average playable.
That's right.
But these don't really move the needle. It's not like you see a 5th pick Blooming Marsh and you're like, wow, we did it. Black green's open.
No, and they're very comparable to any dual land that you've seen at Uncommon or whatever in the last few sets where it like enters the battlefield tapped and gains you a life, or just enters the battlefield tapped. These are slightly better than that, but they're not going to make a huge difference for limited either. So yeah, they're C's or C+. If you're splashing, go ahead and take it a little higher than you normally would. Otherwise, you don't need to prioritize them unless you need them for the old trade binder. All right, and that leaves us with just one other rare land, it seems, which is Inventor's Fair, which is... go ahead,
land.
Read it. Mm-hmm.
It's a rare and a fair. It's at the beginning of your upkeep. If you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. Tap, add a colorless. 4 tap, sacrifice Inventor's Fair, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. So... most decks are just not going to play this because it's a colorless land that does nothing extra unless you have 3 or more artifacts in play.
Which is kind of a lot, yeah.
Yeah, that's not trivial, right? Like a 7 artifact deck just never counts on that. The decks that have like 12, 13 artifacts, in counting Fabricate cards as artifacts, of course. But I think we'll play this because turning a colored land into a colorless land isn't a huge sacrifice, and gaining a life every turn is significant, and then being able to cash this in for your best artifact left in your deck, that is real.
Very real.
So I think Inventor's Fair is like a build around like C plus. Like, I wouldn't really take this over most playables, but if I was an artifact heavy deck, I'd keep an eye on it and try to like pick it up late.
Yeah, I have it built around C as well. I love that sentence that you just said sums it up for me too. Keep an eye on it, pick it up a little later, but I don't think it's ever really going to be a priority. It's fine. All right, and that's it. That does it for our Rare and Mythic Rare set review. We didn't miss anything, did we, Luis? Lands, artifacts, all the colors. I think we did it.
Well, we've got masterpieces.
Right. We do need to talk about... See, I knew there was something in the back of my head that was telling me that. So I mentioned it at the onset of the show. I don't want to go into every masterpiece here. No. How do you want to handle this?
So I've got a list of the masterpieces, and what I think I would like to do is just say, like... So look, here's the reason we don't want to spend half an hour talking about the masterpieces. You're just never going to see any of them. Like, right. we can explain why, Crucible of Worlds is not a good card in Limited, or why Gauntlet of Power, could be good. But you're just never going to see that card, and I don't really want to spend a bunch of time talking about a card you're never going to interact with.
It's not a good use of our listeners' times, frankly.
No. But what it can do is just call out the ones that, in addition to the fact that you're going to take it because these are worth a lot, have a dramatic impact on the game. There's a couple like A++++, or there's one A++, and then there's a couple A's, and just know that you should put these cards in your deck. So the one card that stands head and shoulders, and then head and shoulders again above everything else is Soul Ring.
Soul Ring, my God.
It's my pick for the best card in the Powered Cube. That is Black Lotus. That is Ancestral Recall. So this is 1 mana artifact, tap, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Again, if you see a masterpiece, you're going to take it. Soul Ring, of course, is in its own league, it's the best card I think you can print for Limited, barring some weird format. So
somebody tweeted at me yesterday that they had a Soul Ring, played it on turn 1, and then played Chandra on turn 2 in Limited.
I hope that person didn't realize they're never going to win another match because they used up all their luck.
This is like the Reed Duke line. Congratulations, everybody hates you.
Yeah. Soul Ring's absurd in Limited. The Gearhulks have the same rating as they would in the normal set.
Mm-hmm. The swords.
The swords are quite good. So
they're all A's, yeah.
Yeah, you have Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice, and Sword of Light and Shadow, and they're all A's. Steel Overseer is an A. This is tap, 2 colorless, 1/1, tap, put a +1 counter on each artifact creature you control. Because this just runs away with the game if you ever play it.
Yep.
Solemn Simulacrum is like a B. Like, you'll always just play it and be happy with it, but not go nuts. You also have Mind's Eye, which is a B, 5 mana artifact. When your opponent draws a card, you can pay 1 if you do draw a card. It's probably more like a C+, actually. It's a good long game card. Mana Crypt and Mana Vault are both interesting case studies. I would play both of them, but if you don't end the game quickly, Mana Crypt will kill you. This is a 0 mana artifact that taps for 2 colorless, but every turn you flip a coin, and if you lose the flip, you take 3. Yeah. So it does 1.5 damage a turn. Yeah. So it's sick in an aggro deck and very bad in a control deck.
Yeah, top tip on Mana Crypt also is wait. I know it costs 0, but don't play it right away unless you're actually going to cast something with it right away. And if you do, then by all means. But, play it the turn that you're actually going to cast something with.
Hangerback Walker is where it was in Origins, which is like an A.
It's
just
an A, yeah.
Just a great card. And other than that, there's nothing that's standing out as like,
no.
Yeah, you should probably play this. Like, Sculpting Steel, if you have a ton of artifacts, is like a C. It's not even like an insane card.
Right.
It's just
Chromatic Lantern, if you want to make a bunch of colors, can be fine.
Yeah. So yeah, that's about all we're going to do on the masterpieces.
Yeah.
Because again, realistically, you're never going to see one, especially if you're like me. And if you do open one in a pack, you're just going to take it. You're not going to worry about it too much. So. Yeah.
All right.
They're pretty though.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, good luck opening those. They are really sweet. Okay, that now will do it for the Kaladesh Rare and Mythic Rare set review. I want to remind you, our sponsor, channelfireball.com, pre-orders are up. So if you want to order Kaladesh cards, go there now, and you can put them in your cart. You can pay for them and get them all ordered. And on the 30th, once they're able to ship them, that's when they're allowed to ship them out. CFB will have them on a truck or a plane or a boat or whatever it is to get it to you, and you'll have them in your hands very, very quickly in that way. And of course, while you're there, you can check out some of the awesome free content there, as well as the full selection of other Magic, non-Kaladesh stuff. You can get anything you need, singles, supplies, all that kind of stuff at channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, say hi. we're there. I'm Marshall_LR everywhere. And Luis is LSV. Twitter is our primary means of communication on this, but whatever. I'm around. You can find me on anything. We've got a Facebook page. We've got a YouTube channel. We've got all that stuff. You can find all of those links. We stream as well. Luis streams. I stream on twitch.tv. You can find links to both of our streams on the front page of lrcast.com, along with everything else that we do. It's all on LRcast. You can find it all there. That will do it. Thank you so much for hanging out and spending some time with us. I know that this is an exciting time for Magic players when a new set's coming out. And it's also a busy time. We're happy that you decided to spend a few hours with us. We'll see you next time.
So, since I was at the pre-release, I actually got a pack of Kaladesh due to my winning record. And I wanted to do our first Kaladesh Cracker pack here as
Did you get one?
Mm-hmm. So,
due to your winning record, you got a pack?
But because I don't want to be biased here, so I'm actually going to let you kind of explain your thoughts on the cards, and then.
Oh no, dude! I don't know the cards yet.
No, I'll read the cards.
Oh,
so,
okay.
The first card is Built to Last. It's a 1 white instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains indestructible if it's an artifact creature.
It's medium, whatever.
Okay, you're not excited about it?
No, not at all.
All right.
I'm not first picking it.
All right. Well, the next card is Rush of Vitality. This is 1 in a black. It's instant. Target creature gets +1/+0, indestructible, and lifelink until end of turn.
Okay, I'm not super excited about that one either.
It's a pretty high quality combat trick.
It is a high quality combat trick. It's just not the kind of card I want to first pick.
Okay. Well, let's see what else the pack has. Next up, we have Ornamental Courage. This is 1 green mana. Give a creature a +1/+3 and untap it.
It's not the kind of card I want to first pick again.
Okay, well, I mean, there's a lot of cards left. Next up, we have Built to Smash. This is red for an instant. Target creature gets +3.
Okay, I lost you for a minute there. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, I lost you for a minute. Which is fine, because you were just explaining what that stupid Build to Smash card does. And no, I don't want to first pick it.
Are we back live yet?
Yes, we're still live. I'm not going to cut that out.
You're ruining my Cracker pack. All right, Built to Smash. Red mana, +3/+3. An attacking creature gets +3/+3, rather. And if it's an artifact creature, against trample.
No.
Okay, fine. Well, what about Larger Than Life?
Come on, man.
Sorcery? I just opened this pack. I won it fair and square.
Oh no, I heard you open it, so therefore we know it's real.
Target creature gets +4/+4 against trample. It is a sorcery though, so I imagine you're not really into this.
So this is a bad combat trick, and I don't want to pick this at all.
All right. Well, what about Inspired Charge? This is 2 white. Your creatures get instant. Your creatures get +2/+1 until end of turn.
No, I like the green combat trick better than that still.
Okay, well, we're on to the uncommon. So we have Engineered Might.
We're not on the uncommon.
Which is 3 green-white sorcery. Target creature gets +5/+5 and trample until end of turn, or all your creatures get +2/+2.
All right, this is my front runner.
Okay, you're in for Engineered Might.
Yeah.
Next uncommon is Durable Handicraft. This is 1 in a green.
Is this real? Are these all in the set?
These are all, of course, these are all in the set. They're in this pack. Whenever you play a creature, you can pay 1 to put a ++1 counter on it, or you can pay 6 mana and sack Durable Handicraft to get a ++1 counter on it.
No, I like the other one better.
All right. Well, our last uncommon is Blossoming Defense. This is green. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof until end of turn.
Oh, I like that one. I don't want to first pick it though. I still like the gold card.
All right. Well, our rare is Dubious Challenge. This is a 3 in a green. Give your opponent the best creature of your top 10, and you get the second best. All right. Well, you've got to make a selection. This is your crack.
I don't want to take any of these cards, though. Fine, whatever. I'll take the. I'll take Blossoming, whatever.
Blossoming Defense.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So you're willing to first pick a combat trick.
Yeah, whatever.
I guess that'll do it for today.
Whatever.